Yeah. So good evening, everybody. My name is Councillor Divkovic. I am the chair of this committee, and I would like to welcome you all to the Cambridge City Council's Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee, which is taking place at 6:12 on Thursday, the 21st of March. Now, I'd like people to introduce themselves going clockwise. We can start from Councillor Levian and just introduce what ward you are representing, and if you're an executive, what your portfolio is.
Thank you. So it's Councillor David Levine representing Trumpington Ward.
Also from Trumpington. I'm also the spokesperson for Environment and Climate Change.
Councillor Jean Glasberg, Councillor for Newnham Ward.
Hello, I am Elliot. I am the Green Spokes for Wealth Building and Community Safety, and I'm also a non-substantive member of this committee.
Hello, it's Councillor Mark Ashton, Cherryhinton Ward.
Hello, I'm Councillor Diana Pounds for Romsey Ward.
Councillor Richard Swift for West Chesterton Ward.
Councillor Antoinette Nestor, Castle Ward.
Councillor Sam Carling, West Chesterton Ward, and I'm the Executive Councillor for Open Spaces and City Services.
Councillor Rachel Wade for West Chesterton and Exec Councillor for Communities.
Councillor Alice Gilderdale for East Chesterton and Exec Councillor for Community Wealth Building and Community Safety.
I'm Councillor Rosie Moore. I represent Coleridge Ward and I'm the Exec Councillor for Climate Action and Environment.
Excellent, thank you. I just want to say that Councillor Levian is standing in for Councillor Payne, and she will attend later this afternoon and will be a substantive member later down the line. So, on each agenda item, after hearing the deliberation of the Scrutiny Committee, it's the responsibility for the Executive Councillor to make the formal decision. And the officers permanently at this table for this meeting are the Assistant Director for Housing and Homelessness, Samantha Shimon, the Committee Manager, James Goddard, and the producer, Boris Herzog. Other officers and public speakers will join us throughout the course of this meeting, and I will introduce them at the start of the relevant agenda items. Now, some housekeeping. I have to be brief with this, as we're all familiar. So you'll get copies of the agenda item, which will be found on the seats to the right of the dais. And they're also available online on the City Council's website. Please try and refer to specific page numbers within the agenda if you're referring to them, and also the specific paragraph and or plan. I'd also like to remind those present of the importance of using your microphones when you're speaking. Please could you speak close to the microphone when you're speaking, and also there is a delay with the camera, so if you could pause before speaking, that would be great. Please also ensure that you have switched off or silenced your devices. I know that you access the agenda electronically, but just ensure that it's silent during the course of the committee. Please could you also take note of the fact that your laptop screen is going to be broadcasted at some point, so just be aware of that. And can I also advise members of the public that the only entrance or the exit from the Guildhall is from the Peace Hill entrance, and you can use either the lift or the stairs to return to the ground floor when you'd like to leave. For those participating online on the live stream, if you'd like to speak, could you please just raise your hand or put in the chat. Now, the chat is neither confidential nor private and is subject to freedom of information requests. So make sure your device is fully charged as well, and then your microphone is off, as well as your camera until you're invited to speak. And so the standard process of each of the agenda items is that the relevant officer will introduce the item and his or her report. Then the Scrutiny Committee will discuss the item, and you may ask any questions to the officer or the Executive Councillor for clarification. At the end of the deliberation, I will ask the committee to vote by a show of hands, and I will have the casting vote if it's a tie. At this stage, the executive councillor will be asked to make his or her decision. Only those present can vote or propose second recommendations. And for the comfort of councillors, I can request short breaks, and I can adjourn the proceedings as well. So now I would like to move on to agenda item 2, and this is the opportunity where councillors can declare any interest. So if you have any interest, could you please raise your hand? Yes, councillor.
I'd like to declare that the petition is put in by a colleague of mine, Sarah McManus, and can I make that for you too? Yeah, there we go.
Yes, councillor Pounds.
Yes, I was involved in the Romsey Rec application for item 9, so I will not be speaking or voting on that item.
Thank you. Nobody else? Okay. So we'll move on now on to agenda item number 3, and this is the minutes from the 18th of January, which have been submitted for approval. If there are any concerns, could you raise your hand? If not, I suggest we move to the second agenda item. Yep, councillor Gasberg.
Hi, yes, I have a concern about, on page 12, the reporting in the minutes of my amendment. It says that I requested a change in the recommendation to the officer's report to remove Cambridge Canoe Club additional storage, that it could be delayed until planning permission has been received. So if you remember, I said that it doesn't yet have planning permission, and that as these 106, this is a section of 106 that needs to be spent within a time limit, that this application, well, sorry, this money should not be being allocated to the canoe club at this stage. But I actually said, I mean, I think I also made the point that the officer originally did say that it could be delayed until planning permission had been given. I made the point, and I think members agreed, because you agreed the amendment that I made, which was that it should not be on the list of recommended projects as planning permission has not been given for this extension. And the reason was because the City Council is the LPA as well, and if we had given such a substantial grant, £40,000 to an organisation, even if it did not actually compromise members of the planning committee, and it may well influence them, I think it would be perceived as doing so. So that was the reason. And at the time, that was accepted. So it's the reporting of it that I'm objecting to.
Thank you. Bear with me for a moment, please.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm not quite sure what the amendment is you'd like.
The amendment that I'd like is that the recommendation in the officer's report should be, for the Cambridge Canoe Club, should be removed. Cambridge Canoe Club should be removed. The Cambridge Canoe Club additional storage grant funding should be removed as planning permission has not been received for the Canoe Club extension. And that is what you actually said. It's actually quite a significant difference.
Chair, it looks as though it has been scrubbed out, because if you look at all in the minutes, there's a line being put through it all. So it actually shows on this report here that that's not in. So it's actually been taken out. So if you look on page 10, that has been removed. So
that's correct. The committee agreed that, but the way that it's been reported here is that it's just being until they receive planning permission. But as I say, the planning application has not yet been considered, and they may not get planning permission.
Chair, it does say at page 12 to remove Cambridge.
Yeah, it's page 12, lines 8 to 11. It's, yeah.
It has been removed.
So, Councillor Glasberg, are you happy with the wording on page 12? Because,
No, I'm not happy with that.
okay, so what is the wording that you would suggest?
Well, I just suggested it to you. I mean, I agree that you could either just take that out, yeah, because you have removed it, as the committee agreed, to remove it from the list of approved projects, right? But if you do want to say something, it should be that Councillor Glasberg, I mean, it should say, ask the committee to remove Cambridge Canoe Club additional storage grant funding because planning permission has not been received for the Canoe Club extension.
I'm more than happy to put that in, Councillor, but my understanding is, I think, as I reflected in the minutes, is it was O was removed until permission may or may not be given. Not O would be removed permanently, which is my understanding of what you're saying now.
No, that is actually what I said at the meeting, and I did actually make it very clear to members that the reason was because, I mean, I have to say, the officer suggested that this should be the wording, and I made the point that it shouldn't be because the City Council is the local planning authority. When the planning application goes to the committee, it could be, even if members are not compromised by such a large grant having been given, in anticipation of this planning permission being granted, it could certainly be seen by members of the public that there was a conflict of interest.
Understood, Councillor. As long as the committee's happy with that, I will certainly amend the minutes.
Thank you.
Is the committee happy to proceed on those amendments? Are there any further amendments that are being requested? No? Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item number 4 now, which is the petition that's been received, which has over 50 valid signatures. The petition organiser will be given 5 minutes to present the petition at the meeting, and the petition will then be discussed by councillors for a maximum of 15 minutes. I'm not sure, is it Sue Wells that's asking the question? Or?
It's Sarah Nigmanis.
Okay, thank you. Please could you introduce or make your representation?
Should I sit or stand?
It's up to you.
Okay. All right, I'll stand. Okay, I speak as the Green... Can you still hear me? Yeah. I speak as the Green Party parliamentary candidate for Cambridge City and on behalf of our local party, Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire Green Party. Last month, we released a petition calling for Cambridge City Council to declare its public support for the Climate and Ecology Bill, as of today, renamed the Climate and Nature Bill. This bill was introduced to Parliament by Green Party MP Caroline Lucas in 2020, and today was introduced again as a cross-party bill by MP Alex Sobel. Our petition was signed by 86 people and quickly exceeded the 50 signatories that are required to bring it before this committee. We thank all those individuals who signed and showed their support for this initiative. Copies of the wording of the petition have been distributed around the chamber in your agenda for you to refer to in the debate that follows my speech. We ask that the representatives of our city who sit on Cambridge City Council declare their support for the bill openly and publicly in the local media. Cambridgeshire County Council has signed up to the bill. the City Council is noticeable by its absence from the list of almost 350 local authorities that are in support. Cambridge is renowned worldwide for its expertise in climate and environmental science. By actively endorsing this bill, we reaffirm our city's commitment to global leadership in sustainability and will inspire others to follow suit. With the bill going before Parliament again, it is more urgent than ever that it gets its full support across the country. On Tuesday this week, the World Meteorological Organization sounded a red alert to the world, having released a report confirming that 2023 was the hottest year on record by a clear margin, with records once again broken and in some cases smashed for key indicators such as greenhouse gas pollution, surface temperatures, ocean heat and acidification, sea level rise, Antarctic sea ice cover, and glacier retreat. In Cambridgeshire, we are seeing the dramatic effects of recent extreme weather events. Intense rainfall partnered with hotter and drier summers are making roads unsafe for the public to use. Agriculture has been badly hit by flooded fields, and chalk streams dried up during the recent droughts. As local residents and business owners, we are increasingly vulnerable to the impacts of extreme weather and climate events as their frequency continues to rise. The Cross-Party Climate and Nature Bill would require the UK to develop and achieve a new, more dynamic, necessarily urgent environmental strategy to, firstly, reduce greenhouse gases in line with the 1.5 degrees required under the UK's Paris Agreement obligations. Secondly, instate a measured path to recovery by 2030. Thirdly, put nature, upon which our very existence depends, as a top priority in decision-making. Fourthly, end fossil fuel production and imports as rapidly as possible. And finally, provide retraining for those currently employed by the fossil fuel industries. We also request the Council to write to our MP Daniel Zeichner, asking to publicly support the bill, along with 130 or so other MPs who have already done so. And it's not just councils and MPs who are behind the bill. 881 organisations, politicians and scientists from all over the UK and across 12 political parties, as well as 42,000 members of the public, back the Climate and Nature Bill. We urge Cambridge City Council to join other councils in solidarity, publicly support the bill, and genuinely show that they and the city are true leaders in fighting climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I invite Councillor Moore to respond to the petition?
Thank you very much for bringing this petition. I'm very happy to say that we support the Climate and Ecology Bill, and before this petition I've actually had a few emails from residents asking us to support it, and so I have committed to bring a motion in the next full council, which is May. Just to touch on a few points that you mentioned about being a global leader. Obviously, it's good to be a global leader. We also have to bear in mind that we are a relatively small district council. But I'm very pleased to say that we are recognised in the UK. By the Climate Emergency UK in their scorecards for last year. We're ranked as second of all district councils in the UK for the action that we're taking on reducing our carbon emissions, but also adapting to, unfortunately, the climate change that is already occurring and that's already impacting on our residents. But also, globally, we're recognised last year as one of 119 A-list cities around the world by the Carbon Disclosure Project, and A-list cities are doing 4 times as much as other cities on, again, mitigation and adaptation. However, that doesn't mean we're resting on our laurels. We have still got a very long way to go. and we would be keen to have a new government in this country that enables us to do more as a country and more as a city, and we'll be happy to support this climate and ecology bill and your requests. Thank you.
Now, it's optional whether you want to debate this petition. Can I ask, do members want to debate the petition? Yep, okay, Councillor Hawke.
I'll be very brief. Of course, we are supporting this bill and this petition, so we need evidence-based targets and strategies to reach net zero as quickly as we can, or even negative zero if possible. The bill has been co-sponsored and supported by leading Lib Dem members, including our leaders at Davy and Daisy Cooper, so I have really no problem supporting it. And I would also be happy to support a motion to council. Obviously, I mean, without knowing the details yet, I don't want to promise 100%, but I'm sure that will be successful. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor?
For posterity, I may as well say I support it, even though I think it's kind of redundant to say that.
Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Gillespie.
Yeah, I'd also just like to say I'm so glad that everyone is supporting this, and that we do have some real unanimity on it. It's a very ambitious targets that are going to be set by this bill, and it will be quite challenging, I think, to get it through, but I hope we will be able to get it through. But I mean, Cambridge obviously declared climate and biodiversity emergencies back in 2019. So obviously this is the right thing for us to be doing now. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, it's not generally part of the procedure to ask the public speaker to give a reply, but I'm willing to give you the option if you'd like to, and to keep it succinct.
Yeah, I'm very happy that everybody so far has supported the bill. I thank you very much for the support, and it's reassuring considering the emergency that we find ourselves in. And I hope everybody can focus now on that and the commitments that will be set out in this climate and nature bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is the public questions. I will direct the public speakers when they can address the committee. And this will be for a period of 30 minutes. New public speaking rules, which were agreed in October 2023 at full council, provide that members of the public must send in the text of their public question in advance of the meeting. And the text of the question will no longer be read out as it's published in advance of the meeting. The executive councillor will have 2 minutes to provide a response. Public speakers then have the opportunity to ask a follow-up question of up to 2 minutes, and the executive councillor or officer may respond as appropriate for up to 2 minutes. The committee manager will advise when these time periods are up. After addressing the committee, public speakers are welcome to stay and listen to the rest of the meeting, but they don't have to do so. And public speakers are not entitled to address the committee at any other point in the meeting, and should a member do this, they may be asked to leave. And so we can start with question number 1, which is the public art question by Michael Goodhart. I don't believe he's present.
I understand Chair Mr Goodhart isn't present. The question was submitted online. I'm just waiting to see if we can display it on the side of the chamber just for reference.
Okay, would the executive councillor or officer, the executive, like to respond? Yes, Councillor Wade.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for your question. We could confirm that there is no public art S106 funding still allocated to the River Cam Public Art Programme. In March 2016, following a report to the Community Services Scrutiny Committee, the then Executive Councillor for the City Centre and Public Places agreed a River Cam public art programme with a maximum combined budget of up to £550,000. This was to be funded in part by an allocation of £450,000 of public art S106 contributions, plus external funding bids. However, no external funding was secured, so the funding available was focused on the £450,000 S106 funding. In January 2008, again following a report to the Community Services Scrutiny Committee, the then Exec Councillor for Streets and Open Spaces approved the use of £120,000 from the £450,000 of S106 funding allocated to the River Cam public art programme for the River Cam, later called To the River Public Art Residency. In October 2019, following a report from the Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee, the Exec Council for Communities agreed to deallocate £330,000 of public art S106 contributions allocated to the River Cam public art programme. This was returned to the Council's public art S106 funds for use on other public art projects. This meant that only the £120,000 allocation for the To the River public art residency remained. In March 2022, following a report to the Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee, the leader and exec councillor for communities agreed to allocate between a further £80,000 and £150,000 of off-site public art S106 strategic funds to enable the delivery and or future development of the public art installation arising from the To the River residency, subject to a constructive public consultation response, planning permission and other necessary consents and confirmation of project affordability within the proposed increased budget range. Shall I leave it there?
Wonderful, thank you very much. And there is no supplementary question since this one was submitted. So now we'll move on to question number 2. And I don't believe they're in person here either, so could the relevant executive also respond to that question, which is Councillor Wing?
Thank you. And obviously a written response will go out for the first question. Okay. The report to the Scrutiny Committee, particularly in sections 3 and 4, provides a comprehensive explanation of the background to and the grants rounds process, including the criteria used to assess applications. The applications have been assessed by the Council's expert officers in public art, culture and community development, the Community Grants Team and S106 funding. The expert panel have assessed the grant applications to determine if they would meet the purposes for which public art funding is intended and which offers less flexibility than in other funding streams. If a proposal does not meet the criteria, then it cannot be funded. In March 2022, the Exec Council at the time approved a manifesto for public art called The Cambridge Perspective in response to real concerns about expiry dates related to S106 public art contributions. Officers were also instructed to seek and identify eligible proposals for new public art projects through the development of a commissioning programme to ensure that the S106 contributions that fund public art projects can be used effectively and on time, so as not to have to return the funding to developers. As well as developing the commissioning programme, the Council has undertaken 2023-24 S106 public art grants round to be able to take stock of ideas from local communities for local public art projects and to support the effective use of time-limited S106 about and braces approach, as it were, to be taken to ensure that projects are funded on time and with genuine community benefits. The development of the programme has involved taking into account feedback from a public consultation for the manifesto, conversations with local communities and external partners, as well as colleagues from across the Council. It's underpinned by the principles and criteria set out in the Council's public art supplementary planning document and links to other Council strategies, including the Community Wealth Building Strategy. The 2 projects to which you refer have not been proposed from the Central Council position, but rather through a consultation process and from community feedback to develop projects with meaning to the community and to meet funding deadlines. The council must follow established criteria and a decision-making process in relation to Section 106 allocations. But in keeping with the spirit of the Community Wealth Building Strategy, we have sought to engage community groups in the process, where possible, through the grants round process and through proposing the More Play, Please and Urban Voices projects in the commissioning programme. Did I finish there, Chair? And again.
Thank you, Councillor Wade.
Thank
So now we'll move on to question number 3. And I believe this public speaker is here. Is that Miranda Gill? A substitute for Miranda Gill?
No.
No? Okay. In that event, should we, yeah. Yep, so the executive councillor can respond now or send a reply, yep.
Yep, thank you very much for the question, Ms Gill. Provision of play areas is incredibly important to us as a council, and I think the point you raised about the shocking prevalence of childhood obesity really do underline how essential it is that we all do our part to promote physical activity and healthy lifestyles from a young age. The tier system which this report is using is about equipping us with the tools and information to feed into decisions we make in the future about where to strategically target the limited resources that we have. It's about identifying gaps in provision for different age groups and different types and sizes of play area across the city. Indeed, one of the clear messages from it is that there is an under-provision within the Newnham area, and knowing that, we can look to address it. This isn't about concentrating resources into larger sites, rather it's about helping us make informed, data-driven investment decisions, which also take account of local information and rates of usage. On your point about consultation, I would just reassure you that this is about the underlying principles and tools, and when we go forward and look to invest more in our play areas, we will absolutely continue to put public engagement at the heart of that, as we did with the recent investment of £165,000 into Pulley Park in King's Hedges. I was there last week for the opening of the new equipment, which is going to have a real positive impact on those communities. And this investment strategy is about doing more of that. It's also about equipping our planning team with the evidence they need to push for better, more coordinated provision from new developments. Developers often meet their planning obligations by installing very small play areas on the sites, and while there is a need for those, what the data from this work has shown us is that there can sometimes be too many of those, when what we really need is a strong mix of large and small scale provision, and having the data to back us up will empower us to push for that through the S106 mechanism. On your point about health, I'm very happy to provide reassurance that we will conduct thorough safety reviews of the materials we use in our play areas. Loose materials like rubber crumb are, in my view, detrimental on environmental grounds, as they can easily spread around and act to introduce microplastics into wildlife ecosystems. So I'm also happy to report that I see no reason we want to use that. I hope that's reassuring.
Thank you, Councillor Carling. Can I ask the person for question number 4 is present. Is that Mahoney Goodman? Could you please introduce yourself and advise if you're speaking on behalf of the group?
I'm Marnie Goodman and I'm speaking on behalf of Cambridge GRT Solidarity Network.
Would the executive councillor or officer like to respond to the question? Yes, Councillor Wade?
Thank you for your question. Consultants were appointed in 2019 to carry out an assessment of the accommodation needs of gypsies, travellers, travelling people, bargee travellers and other boat and caravan dwellers. This covered not only Cambridge City and South Cambridgeshire, but other authorities in Cambridgeshire and beyond. In early 2020, the work was paused for a few months as face-to-face interviews could not be carried out due to the COVID pandemic. Following lengthy discussions with the consultants, the contract was subsequently terminated in late summer 2022 as the local authorities who had commissioned the work were not satisfied that it was sufficiently robust to give an accurate picture and stand up to scrutiny. Consultants are currently working for Cambridge City and South Cambridgeshire District Councils, were formally appointed in spring 2023, and their work has progressed according to plan. Officers received the first draft of the report at the end of last week and are currently working through it to consider the initial findings, and further work will be required before it's ready to be published. A publication date for after the May elections will need to be agreed, therefore, between the two councils. Some work has already been taken place in trying to identify suitable solutions to enable Gypsy Roma traveller communities to stop temporarily in the area. Officers will continue to consider options and will reach out again to wider partners once we can share the results of the report with them. We are currently consulting on biodiversity initiatives in Arbury Town Park, aiming to seek a range of views and opinions, and I wanted to clarify that these proposals are not intended to target or exclude travellers from the area. The measures that you mentioned are being implemented at the request of the residents, and we have designed the response with the primary aim of protecting and improving the biodiversity of the park and to ensure its sustainability for all members of the community.
Thank you, Councillor Wade. Miney, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yeah, it just really sort of strains credulity, the idea that this has nothing to do with keeping travellers off this land, because travellers have been repeatedly evicted from that land because they've stopped there, had nowhere else to go, and now they won't be able to. And this is part of a pattern of travellers stopping on land and then a biodiversity project making that land impossible for them to get to. This has happened on Mayfield Green, and it's happened in Trumpington Recreation Grounds, which the Trumpington Recreation Ground Biodiversity Project was referred to as to keep travellers out in Lib Dem campaign literature at the time. So clearly this is part of it, and the fact that you can't admit to that really suggests that you know how wrong it is, and you know what a double standard this is, that the Jatana, it's, oh, we can't do anything about this until the Jatana comes back, we just don't have the evidence, we can't. But with this, so many of these projects are going on around the city which are going to stop travellers being able to get onto land off and land they've been evicted from before. So why can you move fast on one but not on the other?
Thank you, Councillor Wade. Would you like to respond?
Yes, I can't really comment on what was in the Lib Dem election leaflet, but I can assure you that as part of the Meadows redevelopment, biodiversity was always on the cards for the park after the building was finished. And also the latest initiative is in response to consultation from residents, and it's under the EIP project, which is a standard consultation that's taken as part of the council's work for residents to apply individually for things that need to be improved. And this is part of the usual and standard application process, which is put into place after long consultations with residents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Miney. And now we'll move on to, sorry, bear with me, let me just check. Wonderful. Okay, so we'll move on to question number 5, which is on section 106 funding. Now, is Danny Redhead here? Present? No. Could Councillor Carling respond?
Councillor Wade's going to respond to this question, Chair.
Councillor Wade, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for your question. I would point out, however, that it doesn't actually relate to item 11, 2023-24, S106 funding round, streets and open spaces, on the agenda of the Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee meeting on 21st of March 2024. This is not a matter for the Exec Councillor for City Services and Open Spaces. Instead, it relates to the report on the 2023-24 S106 funding round, community and sports facilities, which was considered by the committee on the 18th of January 2024, which comes under my remit, Exec Councillor for Communities. Officers offer to withdraw the recommendation in the 18 January 2024 report for a £40,000 grant to be made to the Cambridge Canoe Club when it became clear at the committee meeting that planning approval was still awaited, because the funding round selection criteria excluded proposals requiring planning permission. Page 8 of the committee's 21st of March 2024 agenda papers include the minutes of the 18/1/24 meeting, which state that Councillor Gasberg requested a change to the recommendation in the officer's report to remove Cambridge Canoe Club additional storage. The committee unanimously approved this amended recommendation, and the committee unanimously resolved to endorse the recommendation as amended. I attach a copy of the S106 funding round guidance, which makes clear that the community groups and sports club could apply for an S106 grant, provided that they both met the selection criteria and would be prepared to enter into a community use agreement for making the improved facilities available for community use and or affordable hire for an agreed number of hours per week for 5 years. This is highlighted in the first paragraph of the front page of the grant guidance and is reflected in the section criteria 4 on page 3 of the guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wade. And we'll now move on to question number 6, which is on the herbicide reduction plan. Could Councillor Carling respond?
Indeed, I can. Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much to Pesticide Free Cambridge for their remarks supporting the work that we're doing and their continued engagement with us as part of our herbicide reduction working group. We have made so much progress on this front, which we'll discuss later on in the meeting in more detail. In terms of the specific requests in the remarks, we can't amend this report to include reference to the 2 initiatives mentioned, that is the Pesticide Free Schools campaign and the Pesticide Free Cambridge College's work that I know Pesticide Free Cambridge are working on. That's just because this report is specifically about our operational standards. However, I absolutely think it's worth highlighting both of these initiatives, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to do so. I encourage everyone here to look further into them. It's really good work that's going on there. I agree that it is crucial for residents to be informed about the ecological, public health and disability access issues around this area, to garner ongoing public support and to encourage a wider shift away from herbicides and insecticides. I will be speaking to a BBC journalist tomorrow for an online piece, assuming the committee supports the recommendations tonight, and there are also ongoing discussions about a potential radio feature about this on Monday morning. So we are very keen indeed to spread the word about the work we've been able to do. In relation to the discussion about pesticide exposure being included in the quality impact assessment, we can amend policy impact assessments at any time. So I'm more than happy to take that request away and consider its inclusion, and we can ensure a written response is given to you around what we do about that point if we don't see you beforehand. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Carling. Now, we've received 2 other draft questions, but considering the number of things we have to get through today, they will get a response after the committee. And now we'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is on the air quality strategy 2024 to 2029, and the presenting officer is Joe Dix. Please could the presenting officer introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the Greater Cambridge Air Quality Strategy. Bringing it before this committee, it's a statutory requirement that we have an air quality strategy. We brought some indication of what we would like to do with that to October committee. So following on from October committee, there were 2 main aims from that committee for the drafting of the complete air quality strategy, and that was to work with our neighbours, South Cambridgeshire, to bring about a joint document that we could both agree on, and that we would set out ambitious objectives to work in pursuance of the World Health Organization air quality guidelines. So South Cambridgeshire have agreed, and we have worked with them to draft something that we're both happy with, and they will be taking that to an April committee. We've also set out in this some interim objectives, so between current national air quality objectives, which we are meeting, and the very stretching World Health Organization guideline levels of pollutants, that we think we can reach, although they are stretching the interim targets, that they're something we think we can reach within the time period set out. So that's it. It also sets out, it replaces our current air quality action plan, which is related to an air quality management area, which we will have to revoke this year because we have met the national air quality objectives. And that's really a positive thing we should embrace, but we're also acknowledging in this strategy that we need to continue to improve air quality because there are no safe levels of certain pollutants. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I will now open the floor to debate this item. Would anybody like to speak, comment? Yes, Councillor Hall.
I actually think Councillor Pounds was first, but I don't mind. I'm happy to speak.
Yeah, just continue.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy about this report and this initiative, especially to see collaboration between Cambridge and South Cambs. It's a bit of a cliche that air doesn't know any about borders, but I think it's true and relevant here. I mean, the only question I have is whether some of these, the data in the report can be translated into something more tangible, like sort of health indicators. Let's say if we cut pollution by half, we will save that many lives, we will reduce asthma cases by that many members. I mean, this is something that I think we could communicate much better to the public, and it would also justify the effort that potentially has to go in much better. So I wonder whether there is anything you could say about that. Thank you.
I'll take questions in bulks of 3. So, Councillor Pounds.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, very, very welcome, this report. I just wondered if you could give us a bit more information about where the pollutants will be measured, where the air quality will be measured in the future, please, around the city lines.
Are there any further questions or statements? Yes, Councillor Levy.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say that Cambridge actually has a very bad reputation for pollution. It's one of the worst towns and cities in the country, I believe, in certain areas, which Councillor Pounds refers to. And at certain times of day, it's particularly bad. I don't know whether some form of variable timing of school closures could be used to mitigate the effects a little bit. It's obviously very serious for children, especially at rush hour times. And I fully support any moves to improve air quality in Cambridge and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Levian. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. So if I take Councillor Hayes' point first, I wouldn't disagree with you. It is a very difficult thing to communicate, but it's also scientifically quite difficult to convert pollutant levels into sort of numbers of lives saved. There's a great deal of complexity there. We have in the past relied on national agencies to look at sort of numbers of premature deaths in certain areas. There was around 50 for Cambridge when our air quality breached national air quality objectives. Unfortunately, there hasn't been any substantive work done on that sort of translation nationally since about 2019, I believe, so quite a long time ago. And air quality has improved significantly since then, hence us revoking our air quality management area. But I take your point, and I think we will be working over the coming year to translate what is necessary under this air quality strategy to get to our interim targets and what that relates to in terms of some more tangible outputs, interim outputs on the way. So, watch this space is what I'd say. Councillor Payne, in terms of your where is air quality measured? Well, we have quite a comprehensive air quality monitoring programme across the city, which we've had for all of the time I've been here, which is 26 years and more. And it's expanded a little bit. So we measure pollutants, the pollutant NO2 monthly at over 60 diffusion tube sites across the city. So we've got a really good geographic spread of quite a low resolution data of one key pollutant. And then we've got 5 continuous monitors that look at particles and nitrogen dioxide on a much more time frequent basis. So with automatic recording and so on at 5 locations, which are Newmarket Road, Gonville Place, the Queen Elizabeth Way, and a couple of other sites, say Regent Street at our offices, and where the other one is. But we have also a couple of other sites that are run privately. So we have one at Addenbrooke's that's maintained under a Section 106 as well, which we get data from. So we've actually got very good data coverage for a city of our size, and that has been supported by the council and has continued to be supported by the council, so it's going to continue. In terms of Councillor Levine's point, I would say that air quality, generally speaking, has improved a lot in the city in the 20 years I've been working here, and it's true that for particulate matter, and particularly small particles, there's no safe level. So, and it is very variable, as you say, determined by weather and activity on the roads at particular times. So it can be very different one day from the next. And exposure periods vary for different types of pollutant. But the thing is, we do meet any current legal standards now. That doesn't mean we haven't pursued initiatives around schools. And we do have some school areas that have traffic restrictions, voluntary traffic restrictions around drop-off and pick-up times. But it's quite difficult to show the impact of those in terms of monitoring because of the variability. But, the drive to keep pursuing as the best air quality we can is what this strategy is all about.
Thank you very much. Are there any further statements or questions? Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's very misleading when we talk about Cambridge is well known for its bad air quality. My mother and father, when they were alive and came from the north of England, used to always comment how wonderful and clean the air was in Cambridge, and the fact that when it rained, it was clean rain. And I think what this should do now is we'll have up-to-date monitoring systems will give us that result. Over the years I've been a councillor, we've had issues with our monitoring shall we say, apparatus that has not been fully reliant. This will now give us the opportunity to be really fully reliant. And what I would like to see is that we get this published on a regular basis through our Cambridge Matters magazine, so all the residents can see where these stations are and what it's monitoring. And if you're doing that every quarter, every 6 months, it means you'll be able to look at the previous year to see how we're going on. So we'll have an easier look at those figures to see what we're doing. But yeah, I would agree that the air is not as bad sometimes as people are making out, and we have to be careful. And this will give us that measure to say we are producing the best we can produce with the measures we've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Councillor Glasper.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for this report. You said you were aware of the air pollution monitoring that has happened for a long time. It was actually introduced when I was first on the City Council, and I was the chair of the Environment Committee. And I have to say, it was introduced to considerable scepticism. The attitude was very much, well, everyone knows the air's bad, what's the point of monitoring it? But anyway, we got it through, and obviously it's been happening all that time. But I think what concerns me, and I was looking particularly page 39 of the report, where you talk, I agree that the key priority really is the community engagement and promotion. And that ties in with the point you've just made really about how do we let people know about this. So that's, you said, improving public engagement through accessibility of the data. And I actually think that is really crucial, because I think unless people really understand that this is harmful and what it actually is, they're not going to understand why they need to change certain kinds of behaviour. And that's why I'd also like to know, I think particularly promotion of the non-idling policy, protection and drop-off near schools, which you've raised, and also the next one about promotion of about the use of solid fuel stoves. I think that these are things that people really need to have a lot more information about. And I'd like to know, how are you thinking of addressing those particular issues, which I think are really important ones in the city? Thank you.
Are there any further questions or statements? No? Sorry, Officer Diggs, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. So taking Councillor Ashton's point, I think probably we need to blow our trumpet about how far we've come, a bit more than we currently do. Maybe that's something we can address in terms of actually meeting the national standards and revoking our air quality management area, which we will be doing during the course of the next financial year. And that's something we can have some publicity around. I think that would be useful to say, yes, we've come so far and we now meet national legal standards, which we haven't done for a good period of the last 20 years. And that's therefore an opportunity to say, yeah, we're continuing to monitor this and we have improved air quality a lot, and that's partly around national action, but partly around local actions as well in the past. So pushing forward an electric taxi fleet and pushing at the electrification of buses and traffic management and so on locally that we've done has had an impact on local air quality over that 20-year period, and we can probably set that out. But the job is not done, and that's what this strategy is about, setting more stretching targets. If I then address your point, Councillor Garsberg, in terms of the key things you've raised, so we've talked a lot in the past about a non-idling policy. The evidence base around a non-idling policy is quite difficult to prove, and it's also a very big enforcement cost. And that's something that we've talked and debated about a lot over the last few years. It's about where is the best place to invest the limited resources we have as a council in order to bring about the biggest changes. And my professional view over that time, and we've looked at this very closely in the past, is that the idling policy is a lot of expense for not very much gain. So I just put that there. I'm not saying we couldn't do it. If I was asked to do it, we'd have to do it. But that would be my professional advice on that. In terms of solid fuel burning, we've had some new legislation recently, new smoke control legislation in the Environment Act. We are taking forward action on that in the coming 12 months. We're about to commission a report looking at how we best quantify what solid fuel burning is going on in the city and how it would be best to introduce additional smoke control areas if that would be a good use of our money and would produce a good outcome. And that's something that we'll probably be bringing back to this committee in the next 12 months. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Officer. Yeah, Councillor Ashton.
Chair, could I ask then, when we talk about improved public engagement, could we actually state that we'd like it to go in Cambridge Matters? Because it's our own magazine, and it's an easy win, and it ticks off that box straight away to say we're increasing public engagement, because we circulate it to every household in Cambridge. So that's something we can go back and say, yes, guess what? We're doing one of the things, the aims we wanted to do. And it's easily measurable as well. Nobody can say we're not engaging with the public, because that's always a question. What we're doing to engage the public, how many consultations have we had? This is an easy win, just put it in Cambridge Matters. Once the figures are there, obviously, yeah, but once we're up and running, I can't see any reason why we can't have that as done.
That's a good suggestion. And are there any other statements or questions? Yes, Councillor.
Yes, I'd just like to agree with Councillor Ashton, because there are a lot of people around the city who actually monitor it themselves, who take a great interest. I mean, I know, for instance, that Pembroke College monitor the traffic because it circles around from Trumpington up Pembroke Street, and it is apparently extremely bad there because so many people are queuing for the Grand Arcade car park and often not getting in. So, I mean, there are lots of suggestions amongst people, and I think it would be good to engage the community more. I think you might get some richer data as well, which will be hopefully helpful as well as your own monitoring.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, statements? Could the officer respond?
Yeah, so I think I'll take those 2 points together. So our air quality data is available live online all the time. So perhaps it's worth signposting people to that. I think it's very worth putting perhaps annual data out in Cambridge Matters. Once a year we have all of our data ratified and legally organised and calibrated and so on, and audited. So that would be probably a good time, and we put that out back to central government. So there's an obvious time where we could issue data. And if people are really interested, they could read our annual report that goes back to DEFRA at that time. So I think that would be a good thing to do. And I'm happy to commit to taking that forward. In terms of including things like people privately measuring their own air quality, I mean, it's a great point of interest, but it's very, very different to measuring air pollutants accurately. It's a very difficult process that requires a lot of quality assurance to make sure the data's good. So it's of interest to people, and they can probably see when it's high or not high. But above that, it's of limited value in terms of real evidence-based analysis. That's what I'd say. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Officer. Right, so I'd now like to go to the vote and to vote on the recommendations. Can I ask those in favour to raise your hands?
That's unanimous of those who can vote, Chair.
Thank you very much. Does the Executive Councillor for Climate Action and Environment, Councillor Moore, approve the recommendation?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. And I'd just like to say, firstly, thank you very much to Joe and his team for all of their work, not only on this strategy, but also on all their hard work, which has helped us to achieve the national targets, which, as he said, is a really good achievement. But this strategy helps us to be more ambitious. And also, I think we shouldn't be kidding ourselves that just because we're achieving the national UK targets, that it means that our air quality is good enough. So it's good to note that a lot of work has gone into it and things have improved, but that there's still a way to go. I think just on a couple of points, I think it was Councillor Levine mentioned about linking it to health. Councillor Hawke. And I think there's really good information about how if you link it to air pollution to deaths, actually people, it seems too drastic. They can't really comprehend that it might result in death. But if you link it to vulnerable, for example, children with asthma, struggling to breathe, or elderly people with COPD, that having a difficult day, that people can understand that seems more realistic. And so I think it's a great idea to have it in Cambridge Matters. This is a really good time to do it, to highlight that the achievements that have been made, but that we've got these new World Health Organization targets. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like us to move on to agenda item number 7, and this is on the Cambridge market status and its powers. Could the presenting officer, Alistair Wilson, introduce the item?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to present to you a summary of the report on the operation of Cambridge Market. The market serves as a vibrant hub of economic activity, offering opportunities for small businesses to thrive, contributing to the city centre's vitality and enriches the community it serves. In line with our commitment to creating a trading environment that aligns with the needs of all users and provides a diverse range of choices for consumers, the recommendations outlined in the report aim to enhance the operation of our market to meet the demands of a modern-day commerce. This report summarises the extensive work undertaken by our markets team and incorporates valuable insights from the National Association of Market Traders legal and policy expert. It presents a series of recommendations that intend to ensure the continued success and sustainability of our market in Cambridge. Crucially, the report underscores the importance of clarity regarding the Council's market powers, providing a reference point for protecting and supporting our current future markets, The proposed engagement framework for the consultation set out in section 5 helps. It emphasises our commitment to transparency and stakeholder involvement in decision-making processes. So the recommendations of the report are set out in section 2, and I'm happy to take questions. I'm also supported tonight online by Tim Jones, who's the market manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer. Now I'll open this item up to debate. Would anybody like to ask a question or make a statement? Yes, Councillor Hall?
Thank you very much. I must say I'm still not really clear what exactly this will mean in practice. In general, it looks like, or it sounds like it will give the council more flexibility to handle markets around the city, which is something we definitely welcome. And we completely agree with the summary, the statement at the beginning, section 1.2, that local markets are important for local communities and a great opportunity for small local businesses. And I was a little bit confused because it mentions markets in plural most of the time in the document. You just started by talking about the market and then mentioned markets. So, and that is, of course, something people like me are interested in. We are dealing with new communities, new developments, where people have been asking for local markets and other, traders for quite a while. But at the same time, Appendix A, Box 6, describes the proposed changes as minor. So I guess creating new markets would be a major change, I guess. So I guess you can see where I'm going with this. So I think there are communities around Cambridge who are really desperate to have more amenities like local markets. And I think I don't have to highlight that I'm particularly interested here in Hobson Square, in Trumpington, where we have campaigned for this for several years, and for mysterious reasons, this hasn't really been possible for all these years. And I think this is in stark contrast to Sainsbury Square, as people call it, in Trumpington Meadows, which is under South Camp's control, where things like that are possible, apparently. So I guess my question then is, so what does all this mean for new developments, including Hobson Square, or also Eddington, where communities might want local markets? And finally, a separate point, I would just like to ask for some clarity on what balance of trade means. So who decides this and how is this decided? Because my initial impulse is to say the market will sort out itself. So traders usually know probably best where and when they can trade, where they can make a profit, and they want some competition, but obviously they don't want to dig each other's water up. So they all want to benefit each other. So, what kind of control is the City Council going to have on this? And ultimately it will be up to the customer to decide if they want to go to these markets or not. And I think on Station Square, which was a different type of market, I think organized by, don't remember, not by the City Council, I think they had problems sort of getting a farmer's market going there. So I think it is actually not necessarily up to us to decide which kind of traders we want. It's ultimately up to the customers and to the traders to decide. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Now that there are quite a few questions there, I don't know if the officer would like to respond now or take more questions. Yeah.
Take that now. So the missing S from market and markets is it's not intentional. We do have a scenario where we've got an existing market product, and the powers will be applied to that market and help us manage a more efficient market. What it does do, the use of the 1984 Act does allow us to regulate and create new markets, and that's what it would mean in practice. So we would have the opportunity to regulate those markets using the same licensing policy and the same balance of trade policy. So, for instance, on the new developments, if someone came forward with a solution or an option, like we have talked about for Hobson Square, that is within the remit of the work. So that's what ordinarily would happen on a day-to-day basis. So that's in practice. In regard of the balance of trade, it is basically, Tim can correct me if I get this wrong, but it is very much around making sure we've not got an imbalance of too much product. So it's about making sure we're not oversubscribed in certain areas and therefore affecting the competitiveness and then for the efficiency, the business efficiency of the market. And in terms of the other potential, the benefit from using those powers, it allows the council to regulate other competing markets. So if someone on private land was to start up a market in direct competition with our own, we've got regulatory powers to control that.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. All of the Trumpington councillors, the 3 city councillors and the county council are all very strongly united in wanting to have street trading on Hobson Square. And I'm grateful to Mr. Wilson and Councillor Carling for visiting a few weeks ago to take a look. And at that meeting, there was a general agreement that we should add some facilities to the square, electrical power, removing some of the bollards so that vehicles, food vans and so on, traders can get onto the square. At the moment, it's very quiet. There's no footfall there. It's strangely a bit like the Mary Celeste, you know. And there should be lots of people and activity there. It is ripe for having street traders. Now, I think that you agree with this, actually, Chair. I can't see a reason why there shouldn't be, you know, trading on the square. One of my concerns, one of the implications I see here is that there's going to be a consultation with market traders, and I presume that means market traders here in the city. Are they going to be consulted whether there should be other street traders? What influence should they have over street trading in Trumpington at all? They shouldn't be aware of it. It would be a great shame if they said that there's enough street traders in the city of Cambridge and Cambridge doesn't need any more trading. I assume that can't be the outcome of a consultation. I'm just wary that it might be. I don't think the city traders here should have any influence over what happens in the, can I call it the suburbs of Cambridge, the outskirts? So just bearing that in mind, but I get a feeling that there is a positive attitude within the council towards this, and I want to say thank you and encourage that, basically. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, it's long overdue. Since 12/11, we've been tampering with what we're doing. So what we need to do is move rapidly on this to get a document that meets the needs of everybody. And what we seem to be saying tonight is it is a problem and will be a continuing problem. So my concern is the timescale for it, because again, we've 1850, 1984, and we're still looking at how we put all this together. So I think we need to give ourselves some kind of timeline to say we aim to get some kind of document we can look at doing within a time frame. Otherwise, it will roll on and roll on. And the consultation, again, who do we consult with? So I think we just need to put some on the bones to this now, so the officers will go away and they can see there's a timeline to get things started by and come back to committee to say this is where we're up to. Because the longer it goes on, the more things drag out again. So, but obviously a much needed document to bring us up to date, and everybody then is on the same page, because we hear time and time again people referring to charters from 12/11, people from 1984, and it needs to be all brought together now so everybody's quite clear what our regulations are and how we operate them. So yeah, thank you for, like I say, getting us up to speed.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Are there any further questions or statements? No? Officer Wilson.
Yes, thank you. Just for a point of clarification, in terms of street trading, when we talk about individual street trading items, those are actually managed by different legislation. It's a different part. But I hear the point about the markets. Where we have a market wishing to trade, we will have the opportunity to then be involved with the discussion about regulating and managing that market. In terms of the consultation, it is intended to get a range of views on topics around terms and conditions, around things like waste management, about trading hours, about collections of rents, rent payments, any discounts. So it's going to be fairly thorough. In terms of, here the point about Councillor Ashton makes, again, same point on the consultation, it's very much drafted, it's ready. It is waiting till after the election. It's in a period, obviously, a period before the election. And the intention is to work with the traders up to a point in the autumn where we'll be able to review those documents again back at Scrutiny Committee. So the balance of trade and the licence policy with the terms and conditions as one document. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or statements? Okay. Yes. You'll wait. Okay. Right. So we'll now move on to the substantive vote. Could those in favour please raise your hand?
That's all who can vote, Chair.
Wonderful. And again, this is the Executive for Climate Action and the Environment, Councillor Moore. Do you approve of the recommendation?
Thank you. Yes, I do approve the recommendations. It's good to be using the best, most up-to-date, as you said, from 1984 legislation. And just on, I think this time it definitely was Councillor Levine who talked about the balance of trade. Was that you? Was I wrong again? It was you. Okay. Councillor Hawke. The balance of trade, I think you'll find that the market traders really value the markets team having a balance of trade policy, and that actually they don't want too many traders of one sort undercutting, because obviously it's quite, or swamping the market rather, sorry, not undercutting, because being a market trader is quite hard work. And as we all know, we live in quite difficult times. And so it's really important that there's a good balance, not only for shoppers to encourage more people to use the market, but also for the traders themselves so that they can earn a decent wage from their store. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. And I'd like to ask members and staff whether they're happy to have a break after item number 8, 5-10 minute break. Are you happy to proceed now? Yeah? Okay, so now we'll move on to item number 8, which is on creativity and culture for all. And this is the City Council's cultural strategy for 2024 to 2029. Could the presenting officer, Francis Alderton, introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. As you say, this item is to ask members to approve the cultural strategy 2024 to 2029. This document outlines the Council's support and approach to cultural activity and cultural development in the city over the next 5 years in its most broadest sense. Principles have previously been discussed at the January committee, and the body of the document still stays true to those main principles. There is some more detail on how we capture data and evidence and how we evidence progress. And also we've been doing some further consultation in between January and the current day today. We also have reiterated how this strategy will assist in a shared vision for Cambridge and beyond by working in partnership with other stakeholders and organisations across Cambridge City, but also region-wide as well. It also is designed to align with our other council strategies, in particular the Community Wealth Building Strategy and the Youth Strategy, which is currently being developed.
Thank you. And now I'll open the floor to debate. Would anybody like to ask a question or make a statement? Yes, Councillor Pound?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to say thank you so much for this strategy. I mean, it's a really, really excellent report and a very fine piece of work. And I think it's what it's doing so well is it's bringing all the stakeholders, all the groups, all the voluntary groups, all the people engaged in the arts and culture in the city together and feeling that they are stakeholders and they are part of this, and that's really, really welcomed. I'd also like to say thank you for the cultural conference, which you staged a few weeks ago, because that was the strategy in action, and it was lovely and really, really informative event. So thank you for that. So I'd just like to ask, really, how are you going to communicate this strategy to residents and as widely as possible? Do you have any plans for that?
Thank you. I'll ask a few more questions first. Are there any further questions? Yes, Councillor Hawke, and yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for your hard work. That we support the principles of this report, of course. I mean, I guess most of this in practice will depend on money available, so what can actually be done and how this will look like, and also the infrastructure within Cambridge, which is not necessarily under our direct control. So I've heard from quite a few people that, for example, they don't go out at night in Cambridge because they don't know how to get home in the evening. I mean, unless they want to pay a taxi, or parking is expensive. So things like that will affect who does what in Cambridge. And I mean, of course, also talking about money. So if big community events are really so good for our well-being and the community, Cambridge, which I think I fully agree with, then was it a mistake to cut the big weekend?
Thank you. And Councillor Ashton?
Yeah, that leads on to my question, really. As a city, we pay a fortune for people outside the city to come to our events. So is there any way we can look, again, at a contribution? When we talk about being Greater Cambridge now, can we get South Cams, can we get East Cams to pay into some of our cultural developments? Because when we look at the figures, we've got the figures that show there's a huge amount of people coming from South Cams to look at our events. So we are subsidising people from outside the city. So one way of helping our residents would be to try and get some money back, because we're paying through our council tax for these events and the other people aren't paying anything. In regards to car parking's free at the Grand Arcade after a certain time at night, so they can come in. So again, we've got people from outside the city enjoying free car parking. So, you know, I think we should be looking at how we can maybe maximise our revenue from other authorities, which I know will be difficult, but I think it's something, now we're talking more about shared services and what we do, it's a thing we should be tackling. Thank you.
Would Officer Alderton like to respond?
Thank you. In terms of how we want to communicate the strategy, we have already been communicating and consulting with key stakeholders within the city and also the region, in particular arts organisations, but also businesses and other local authorities. We also use the Cambridge Arts Network to communicate the strategy to creators and artists and people within arts organisations. And we also are very supportive and involved with a new organisation called Create Cambridge, which is a body of people that want to promote culture and the cultural strategy within the city to a wide range of people. We will be doing a public press release to launch the strategy, and we will also be communicating it through Cambridge Matters and doing some consultation with non-user groups and discussions at live events. So those are some of the examples of how we're going to communicate. In terms of large events and how we contribute to the community cohesion in the city, I think one of the things within the strategy is that we will be looking to work more in partnership with a lot of different organisations. So we will not just be the one direct deliverer of any events. And we have increasingly over the past 5 years been working in partnership with commercial operators that can provide community events in outdoor spaces, but also within our venues and other public realm spaces as well. So that will help us in terms of maximising our revenue from events and also offsetting the investment we will make that sort of benefit to the whole of the region rather than just our city residents. I also wanted to add that we are also doing a cultural infrastructure strategy, which isn't yet in draft form, but this will run alongside the cultural strategy and will help inform us with regards to what infrastructure we've got and what infrastructure we need to provide in the city in the next 10 to 20 years as the city undergoes quite rapid growth. And this is being done in partnership with Shared Planning Service, but also with South Cams. So within that, we are recognising the regional draw of our services, but also what South Cambs can provide within their own region as well. Oh, and the other thing I was going to say is that alongside any contribution that the City Council makes to any events, again, in partnership, we work very closely with the Arts Council and the combined authority that will be investing in culture and cultural activity. So their remit is obviously region-wide, not just city-wide.
Thank you. I know Councillor Swift wanted to make a statement. Do you still want to? Or ask a question? Yep.
Yeah. It's not so much a statement, it's just thanks very much for this, all of this information. There are lots of very interesting things in this that go beyond just the financial, because the culture and the arts, for me, is, and from everybody, I suppose, social capital is the glue that binds communities together. All of that, and then, for example, later on, 90% of Edinburgh residents felt that its annual festivals improved their pride in the city. It's about things you can't quantify very easily, but are what make life worth living. And the arts are the way of doing that in a very effective manner. I was surprised that 16% of the population of Cambridge is under 15 years of age and 30% under 25 years of age. All of those things are really interesting bits of information. I was also impressed by the Meadows lunch club during the summer holidays, things that actually interconnecting the museums with food justice in very imaginative ways that is part of culture and part of actually delivering for all. I'm very impressed with all of those sorts of initiatives, so thanks very much.
Yeah, Officer Alderton, would you like to respond?
Thank you for those comments. I just wanted to add that we are looking at how we measure the impact of culture in the city and how we measure the impact of culture to the community and also to the economy of the city. And there's some really interesting work from the Bennett Institute on how you can measure pride of place, and that's something that we really are interested in, particularly when we're working with the planning service and with new communities.
Thank you. So unless there are any further questions or statements, I'd like us to move to the vote. Okay, so could those in favour of the recommendations please raise your hand?
Unanimous of those who can vote.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to turn to the executive, which is Councillor Wade. Do you accept the recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do accept approve the recommendation. I'd like to thank all the officers for all their work and just to reiterate what people have said, why this is so important, particularly with the underfunding of from central government of the arts, to set out what we have as a city and how we want to engage with everybody, with what we have to offer to bridge the gaps, because I think that things that bring us joy and an escape from our daily lives are intangible to measure, but essential to our well-being and quality of life. This is a resource for people's delight, education and health. And as I say, funding for the arts has collapsed. Access to arts subjects has been downgraded in schools. So we're blocking the pathway for creativity for the future. So inspiring children to think creatively and build confidence, using civic and community spaces in Cambridge to help build engagement and a sense of place and pride in our community and vital. So thank you to the officers, and I look forward to the next phase. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wade. And on that note, I'd like to just call a 10-minute break. Everybody's happy? Yep. So could we return at 7:51, please? Thank you. Now we're ready? Yep. Okay, can I ask people to be silent, please? Okay, so we're now moving on to agenda item number 9, which is the public art commissioning strategy and the use of Section 106 funding for public art. So that's Alistair Wilson. Introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to use this introduction to highlight the Section 106 funding context behind this public art commissioning programme. Off-site public art projects managed by the Council to mitigate the impact of development are funded from Section 106 contributions paid by developers. The Section 106 funding is secured from legally binding Section 106 agreements. Decisions over this use must meet planning policy requirements, in this case, the Public Art SPD. The terms of the Section 106 agreements and official regulations reflect the public art criteria outlined in paragraph 4.2 and explained in Appendix B of the report. Section 106 funding also has to be used on time, and paragraph 3.7 explains that there are over £448,000 worth of public art funding that needs to be contractually committed between September 2024 and July 2027. The details are set out in the bar charts in Appendix A for your reference. Allocating public art Section 106 funding to projects in the public art commissioning programme is important to help make sure that the funding is used on time. Paragraph 6.1 explains the serious and financial implications if Section 106 cannot be used for its intended purposes and on time. Between November and late January, the Council ran a public art Section 106 grant round to seek proposals from local groups working with artists which would meet the selection criteria. The aim was to provide more options alongside the public art commissioning proposals to help the Council use the Section 106 funding on time. The application process and the detailed grant guidance was in line with the approach for Section 106 funding rounds across all Section 106 contribution types over the past 12 years, so that it was fair and consistent. The assessment of the 9 applications received was carried out by a team of 5 officers with specialist knowledge of public art, culture, community grants, Section 106 funding, who considered the applications carefully together and agreed the assessment. I'm acutely aware that some applicants will be disappointed, not least because the report only recommends 1 application for public art Section 106 grants. Paragraph 4.5 of the report recognises the time and the effort taken by community groups and artists in putting forward their thoughtful proposals, which have a lot of merit to them. The difficulty, however, is the assessment of the grant application is not about whether these are good projects per se, but whether they would meet the purposes of the public art Section 6 funding as intended. I would, however, wish to apologise for a communications glitch during the application round. I'm afraid that email inquiries during the application period raised on behalf of 1 applicant when developing their proposals went unanswered. We recognise that this lack of response could have put this application at disadvantage in submitting their final application. As a result, officers will make contact with the Riverside Residents Association to give it an opportunity to revise its application, which will be reassessed against the selection criteria. If the revised application were to meet these criteria, officers would seek to use recommendation 2.4 of the report so that Director of City Services could use delegated authority in consultation with the Executive Council, Opposition Spokesman, Scrutiny Committee Chair, to add a further grant to the commissioning programme. I'm sorry this process issue has deflected attention from the wider proposals in the report. The table on page 180 sets out the programme of public art projects that would help the Council to bring forward a range of high-quality public art projects that engage local communities, not least young people, through the Urban Voices Public Art Commission. Although the grant application for Romsey did not meet the selection criteria, officers are keen to work with the local councils and communities from the ward on a new commission with a budget more than 5 times that was required to enable them to spend the Section 106 in a timely manner. I'm supported tonight by the Urban Growth Manager, Tim Weatherfield. I'm also supported online by Benin Black, who's the Public Art Officer, and I'm very happy to take questions on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer. Now I'll move on to the debate, and I'll take them in blocks of 3 as well. So Councillor Tong first, and then Councillor Nestor.
Hello. So I have quite a bit to say, so I'll try and take it in a rather structured order. However, it may be a little bit non-linear. Now, I want to acknowledge the fact that public art is really important, and
Can I just have a point of order? If you're the spokes for community wealth building and community safety, as a spokesperson, are you able to speak on items that aren't within that area of responsibility?
Chair, any councillor can attend any public meeting and speak with the permission of the chair.
Apologies, I just wanted to check, thank you.
Okay, sorry, that was a bit, okay. I'll start again and say that I think public art is really, really important. And I really do appreciate the efforts put into by the City Council to promote public art in the city. However, I don't think this process here has been handled particularly well. Now, I know, well, I'll address some of the measures taken to rectify this at the end. However, as has been acknowledged here, 8 out of 9 of the projects that were community-led were shot down, in a lot of cases for quite minor reasons. And I don't think this encourages people to put the effort in to go through and apply in the future, when a lot of these problems could have been addressed with a quick phone call or a really quick email. Like, some of them were incredibly...
Sorry, Councillor Tong, I'll need to interrupt you there because the committee manager would like to just speak.
Sorry, I could understand where Councillor Gilderdale was coming from. What I should have added to clarify, any councillor may address the committee with the permission of the chair, but needs to ask in advance. And as Councillor Gilderdale said, you are here to shadow Councillor Gilderdale. If you wanted to speak on any other portfolio, when you start making political points, I would have just suggested raising that with the chair.
Bear with me, Councillor Tong.
As for the record, I thought by putting my hand up and getting permission from the chair, that was asking for permission from the chair. I thought that, to me, that seems that if I'm told I'm allowed to speak, that's getting permission in the formal sense.
Sorry, bear with me.
You're in a slightly a grey area, Councillor Tong. You're on the committee, as you fully admitted when you came on, as sort of invitation because you're shadowing Councillor Gilderdale. If another councillor had asked to join the committee who wasn't a member of the committee, they would have said, I would like to specifically speak on item whatever, to speak on it. So you are part of this, invited to join this committee more to shadow Councillor Gilderdale than anything. But I would have... So you're a sort of special case, but it's a bit difficult. So yes, I understand why you think you can speak, and it's really Chair's discretion if she allowed you to, but that was what I was trying to answer both of your points, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, don't worry, I understand your point, and I understand there's, bureaucratic obstacles, but this is, when I said it's under the Chair's discretion, surely if I put my hand up and the Chair says yes, that's her discretion to allow me to speak.
It also depends on the content of what you want to say. So, regardless of whether I do invite you to speak. So, on the basis that I have already invited you to speak, I will allow you to ask on this occasion, but in future, could you mention, obviously, beforehand that you would like to ask a question on a relevant agenda item?
Okay, that's fine. So, sorry, I'll pick up where I was, which was related to the idea that 8 out of 9 of the community-led projects were shut down, and I think that is quite disencouraging for people. I know Councillor Wade made the point when Nikki Shepherd from Abbey People mentioned that it seems unfair that officer-led projects are getting priority, that these aren't officer-led and consultations have been had. But I still don't think that really does contradict the idea that some of these projects are, officer-led. Officers have taken the initiative with these ones, whereas some of them have been pitched directly from the community. And when up to £313,000 has been set aside for these officer-led projects, even if one was kind of removed from community hands, so with the Romsey project, it was originally a community project, I just think it leaves quite a bad taste in people's mouths. And I know there's been issues with this in the past. One of the famous examples is with Newnham and the Golden Rings by the River project, which was, from what I understand, very officer pitched and ended up not being accepted by the community. And I think it's because sometimes we tend to make our decision-making very top-up, where we effectively impose culture downwards. However, I think we really need to focus on supporting these community-led projects first. That seems to me we need to exist to empower community artists. So one of the things I want to discuss was, I know measures are in place and conversations are being had to fix some of these issues. One thing I will clarify, sorry, I unfortunately forgot to because of the whole kerfuffle, which is obviously Naomi assisted with the RORA application to a certain extent, so that's a potential conflict of interest I'll flag here. However, there are still mistakes have been made here, and I just wanted to ask what could potentially be done in the future to rectify some of these issues, to make sure they don't happen again, because to a certain extent, I'd say the damage has been done with this. Yeah, basically, what can we do in the future to perhaps fix some of these issues so they don't happen again, and we do more to prioritise these community-led projects?
Thank you, Councillor Tong. And I know Councillor Nestor, you wanted to ask or make a statement?
It's a very similar question, but with much, basically less time. So why are so many of the residents' applications being refused, and what is being done to rectify it? Thank you.
And Councillor Ashton?
Thank you. I think it's frustrating for everybody, 106 funding, and the officers do a remarkable job because their hands are tied sometimes by what is the legislation for what can and what can't be done. And I think long-standing councillors have all suffered disappointment over the years when they've asked for funding for various things. So it's not just the communities who ask and residents separately. And I think maybe going forward, we need to try and find a way where the ward councillors with the communities are involved together, because there's no doubt if you've got 50 community organisations putting an application forward, 3 ward councillors putting applications forward, they don't tie up. It's putting extra work on the officers to try and work through them. We have a limited pot of money, and what we have to do is very strategic how we allocate that pot. So I think with the communities, we need to try and ensure that those organisations come through the councillors so we can then be batting on one accord. And the councillor will understand then, if he's got 50 community organisations saying, I want to share with this pot, he'll have to have a look as well and say, well, there's no way you can all have it. Which way can we try and do it as well to try and take a strain off the officers as well? Because otherwise we put an unbearable amount of work on them unnecessarily. So, but it is a very difficult one to do, and I understand Councillor Tong's frustration with it, and I wish there was an easy solution, but maybe as we discuss it more, we can find ways through. But I know legislation is very tight on it, and the council in the past have had to pay money back because it hasn't been spent in time. So it is a challenge that we need to work up quicker on what we want to spend the money on and get it organised.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Would Officer Wilson like to respond?
Yes, thank you. I fully understand the perception that these may be officer-led projects in the programme. However, they do have a backstop around previous recommendations by executive councils. So the manifesto that was approved in 2022 instructed officers at that time to develop the programme based on the use of Section 106 funding. There have been discussions with colleagues and within teams to determine the strategic fit of the spend. So they are broadly aligned with the council's broader ambitions. The compliance section of each of the items in Appendix F sets out where the relationships are with that strategic fit. And in respect to the eligibility and regulations of the funding, the report is extensive in explaining how that is carried out. I would just finish in terms of the question from electronic. We are accountable for that use of that public spend, and therefore it's really important that the assessment criteria, the assessment of those grants was thorough. In terms of the decision-making process for the public art grants, it involves careful consideration of the criteria, including the alignment of the proposed projects with those criteria and objectives outlined in the grant guidelines, the available budget and resources, the expiry dates for the funding, and the overall artistic merit, the budgetary considerations and the feasibility of the projects that are being proposed. Whilst it's regrettable that not all applications can be approved due to the budget constraints and the need to maintain quality standards, the refusal are not a judgment of the intentions behind the applications, but the Council is legally bound to ensure Section 106 governments are used to mitigate the impact of development, to prevent challenges to the use of the funding, and they're allocated in a timely manner to ensure that the funding does not have to be returned to the developer. Ultimately, the goal is to create an inclusive and accessible public art programme that provides definable benefits to the community with limited public funding available, that meet the criteria and mitigate the impact of the development. And this is what the Scrutiny Committee is being asked to approve this evening. With regards to working with the applicants to develop proposals which meet the criteria for funding, there are practical considerations other factors that need to be included, such as planning, about available space, about whether the product is actually ready to go. That is why we decided to work with the Romsey councils on their product to get them to a point where it would meet the criteria of funding and allow us to spend money that's close to expiry dates. I think the crucial point here tonight is that the guidance set out in the council's website that the applicants were assessed against was fair and professionally assessed on each application on its merit. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer. Are there further questions? Yes, Councillor Hall.
Well, I mean, I can only make some general comments. I don't know these specific issues there, but as an academic, I'm painfully aware how frustrating it can be to get grants rejected because they didn't, what you think is a great grant or a great application because you don't tick certain boxes of the grant provider. That doesn't necessarily mean that these applications were shot down. So I feel that's a little bit unfair to our officers to say that they shot any applications down. I'm sure they had their criteria, and you can always debate whether these criteria were valid or not. Usually when we get our replies about grant applications, we think, oh, but we could have addressed that. We could have, well, but we didn't, it wasn't there. They had to make a decision. So my message then to the applicants would be, I mean, just don't be discouraged. I think a rejection shouldn't be discouraging. There is a limited amount of money. There are certain projects that will win and others will lose, but keep trying. Learn from it if you can and just keep trying. But of course, I don't know if there were any procedural issues here. I don't want to say anything about that. I don't know the details. But in general, you win some, you lose some, but keep trying.
Thank you. Are there any further statements or questions? Yes, Councillor Carling.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's helpful just very briefly to highlight that there's a broader piece that we're picking up here around engagement with residents on grant applications. So the county have quite a good model on holding drop-in advice sessions for local highways improvement applications, for example. And it's something I'm keen to replicate on the EIP applications that we run from the City Council. So this is something we're very keenly aware of. And we're looking at what improvements we can make to our processes, essentially. And this isn't just an issue that we're having. It's replicated across lots of councils, especially with public art S106 funding, because it is just particularly difficult in terms of the restrictions placed upon it. So hopefully, there are some lessons to learn across all of what we do, really, and across what other councils do, that we can hopefully pick up and improve processes going forward. And thank you to Councillor Houck as well for the comments he's just made, which I think is very helpful.
Sorry, Officer Weatherfield.
Chair, if perhaps I can add some comments from the perspective of having been involved in the Council's overall coordination of its approach to Section 106 funding over the last 12 years. I've been involved in every funding round for every contribution type and in the assessment processes. And the point's been made that we learn every time and we improve every time. What we have now, although I'm sure it can be improved further, is we have clear selection criteria that are have been agreed up front, and the ones for public art reflect the key criteria in the public art strategy. We have guidance, which the guidance for the public art round are very similar in their form as those that have been used in previous grant rounds, not least the community facilities and sports facilities grant round. And we have a clear assessment process. Now, as I say, I've been involved in every round over the last 12 years and was involved in this round. And the conclusions that the whole assessment team arrived at, from my perspective of that institutional memory on this, I considered the way they approached it and the assessments that they made to be consistent, fair and reasonable. That's just from the point of view, but I think it shows that consistency across, which I hope is helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if Officer Wilson wants to respond as well, or are you happy to proceed? Okay, are there any further questions or statements? No? Well, in that case, I'd like us to go to the vote then. So could those in favour please raise your hand?
Yeah, 7 in support, Chair.
Could those against raise your hand?
1 abstention, I think there'll be.
Yeah. Okay. And now this goes to the Executive Council for Communities. Again, Councillor Wade. Do you approve the recommendation?
Yes, Chair, I do, and thank you. And just to address some comments from earlier. So here we are again discussing this emotive and important issue which leads to so much debate. And aren't we privileged as a local authority to be having this debate? As we know, many local authorities are declaring themselves bankrupt throughout the UK. Birmingham, for example, is cutting funding of its arts by 100%. So we are in the position that we do have, albeit limited public funding for the arts via the Section 106 criteria from developer contributions, which has both legal constraints and is time limited. That public art matters is clear from the questions arising from the round of applications and from the debate we've had here. We have issued the public art commissioning document, which I hope helps to give structure and understanding of the vision going forward, which is to develop a programme of public art commissions that genuinely engage and benefit communities. The public arts round was conducted properly. The assessment was made by a panel which included a manager who has worked in this field for 12 years. This has helped to make sure that the assessment was fair, objective and consistent. The deadline for applications was extended to 11 weeks for the applicants to reply, and guidance was issued re selection criteria and public art guidance. So I am satisfied, to answer Councillor Tong's question, that the criteria have been applied equally to each application. Page 172 of the report states that officers are keen to work closely with communities and councillors, as the officer has already referred to, in the wards of Coleridge, Trumpington and Cherry Hinton, where funding is still available. And I will ask that communications looked at so we can improve awareness of where funding is still available going forward. Art is important, and it's important that art is made to be part of the community. Only when we don't have access to art or it's censored and removed by authoritarian regimes, as is happening in Hong Kong at the moment, do we understand its importance and significance. So I welcome this manifesto, and I also welcome the Trials of Democracy project from the Menagerie Theatre. I welcome More Playful Art Please, which is stated on page 199, will build on the intergenerational nature work, and identified the need to visit older people with disabilities and cognitive problems who would not otherwise engage in projects like this, and the benefits to their mental health was observed. Or Urban Voices, that aims to work, reflect and celebrate and nurture the city's young residents, on page 198, giving voices to those that don't feel heard, to explore what it means to be a young person in Cambridge, helping them to flourish and inform their confidence, skills, identity and aspirations, nurturing our young residents.
Sorry, Councillor.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Because when you're leaning, it was against the speaker, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So now we'll move on to agenda item number 10, which is on community. Oh,
Chair, I think I'm the alt for Councillor Cheney, who
okay, sorry, yes.
Can I just change
Councillor
seats?
Payne is
I'm
here
going to
now,
stay here because
so
I'm still quite
she'll be
interested in
doing.
one or two of the items. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Yes, thank you very much. Welcome, Councillor Payne. Okay, before we move on to agenda item number 10, I know Councillor Gilderdale wants to say.
Sorry, I just want to make a declaration of interest, if that's all right. I work for It Takes a City, which has worked with the City Council on the Social Impact Investment Fund, which is noted in this report as a community wealth building project.
Okay, thank you. And so now we'll move on to the agenda item, and this is on the community wealth building strategy. Could the presenting, I know they're joining us online, David Kidston, introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. The report presents the Council's community wealth building strategy for approval. The aim of the strategy is to address poverty and inequality in Cambridge and help create a more sustainable and inclusive economy. The community wealth building strategy represents an evolution of the Council's approach to these issues, and it will replace the current anti-poverty strategy from April 2024 onwards. A key part of the community wealth building approach involves collaboration with partners, including community groups, businesses and public sector organisations, to establish whole system approaches to addressing poverty and inequality. So I wanted to highlight that the development of the strategy has been a collaborative process to date. We've had a series of stakeholder workshops, one-to-one meetings with key stakeholders, and stakeholders have been provided with opportunities to comment on various drafts of the strategy and help to shape the document that is presented to you today. So I'm very happy to take any questions that members of the committee may have.
Thank you. I'll now move it to the debate. Has anybody got anything to say? Yes, Councillor Tong, and we'll go in bulk, so then we'll go Councillor Payne and then Councillor Hogg.
Hello again. So firstly, I want to say thank you for your work on it. It's great to see this come to fruition. I think in quite a few places the document's a bit vague, and I discussed this with council officers. And one thing I was particularly interested in was the discussions about cooperatives and non-traditional business models, because I really, really appreciate the opportunity we have here to empower community-led projects and businesses. So one of the things I wanted to discuss was, could we get some more detail on the different ways you're thinking about supporting community-owned projects and cooperatives, and how you might do more to promote these sorts of business models? Because I think a lot of people don't actually really consider them, and it would be great to do more outreach to show them that they are possible and can be successful in the city.
Yes, Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies again for lateness, Chair. Thank you very much for the support. I think, certainly on our side, it's fair to say we really welcome this slightly different approach, which seems to be moving away from alleviating poverty, but towards a slightly different focus on building wealth and empowering communities, which I think is a very liberal concept. So therefore, you won't be surprised to hear we're quite in support of that. I've just got a couple of questions around some of the detail. The first one is on the stakeholder workshops, which I think sound like a great idea, and there's a list on page 228 of the report of the different stakeholders involved. Can I just ask around how they were selected? Did they come forward to take part, or were they selected by the council? And I think one group which to me seems to be missing from there is the role of residents' associations. We're all really fortunate in our different areas to work with a number of residents' associations who really do have their finger on the pulse in terms of what's happening within the local area. And certainly given some of the disparity you see within the report of the different social indicators, I think it'd be really important to try and involve residents within this as much as possible. So I just wanted to ask whether there's any plan to do that going forward, or whether there's a reason it wasn't just appropriate to include them at this stage. And then my second question is around the different capitals that we're measuring on. So that they're listed on page 256, the human capital, social capital, etc. There's no view in the report of how we feel we're doing on those different measures. But is there either a comparison to how other local authorities are doing on those measures so we can kind of compare ourselves, or is there a standard that's expected to be good? As Councillor Thompson, I think it's very difficult for some of these things to quantify, isn't it? So sometimes things like human capital, skills and physical mental health, that's quite a vague concept, so it's quite difficult to rank how well we are doing comparatively. So is there a way that we can kind of add that detail in around those capitals? Thank you.
And Councillor Holt.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments, really. So, as Councillor Payne said, we welcome this strategy, of course. So usually, I think socialists are trying to achieve equality by making everybody equally poor. So it's very welcome to see that they are now thinking about wealth building here in this council. So Cambridge is still the most unequal city in the UK after 10 years of Labour rule, which means Labour don't really have the silver bullet either. But of course, we will welcome and support any initiatives that successfully address issues with poverty around the city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hawke. Would Officer Kidston like to respond now?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to respond to those questions. In response to Councillor Tong's question about cooperatives and non-traditional business models, I think we've said in the strategy that we would be looking to develop more progressive procurement policies. So particularly looking at social value in our procurement policies, but also ways that we can open up the supply chain to different business models. And that could include social enterprise, but also a range of other models, including cooperatives and some of the other models that Councillor Tong has mentioned. And we will also be looking to engage with anchor institutions in the city and also larger businesses in the city to explore how they can open up their supply chains to similar types of businesses. In terms of Councillor Payne's question about empowering communities and the stakeholder workshops, we selected the attendees for those workshops based on partners that we knew were working on the areas that we've identified in the strategy, so the sort of key themes for the community wealth building strategy. And they were a mixture of business groups, public sector stakeholders and community groups, reflecting the need for a whole system approach to the issues of poverty and inequality, and the fact that the council, acting on its own, can't address these issues. So in terms of the community groups, they were ones that we felt were able to were operating in sort of a citywide or a strategic sphere, and therefore would be able to give us a sort of broad view on the community wealth building proposals. I think it's fair to say that community empowerment is key to the community wealth building approach. It's one of the four themes that we've outlined, and therefore, as we develop further community wealth building initiatives and projects, we would expect to involve local community groups, including residents' associations, in those projects. And lastly, just on the question around the 6 capitals, which we've referenced throughout the document, I recognise that it is challenging to measure things like human capital and social capital. We have included in the appendix to the community wealth building strategy a series of high-level outcomes which we will be measures that we know data is available for, which we will be using to measure the different capitals. And I consulted with the Bennett Institute for Public Policy at Cambridge University, who've done a lot of work on the wealth economy in the 6 capitals, and they highlighted measures that have been used in the Levelling Up white paper and other strategies at a national and regional level. So there is a tie-in between those measures and other strategies that have measured the 6 capitals. And we will be tracking those measures and able to report on them in future.
Thank you, Officer. Are there any further questions or statements? Yes, Councillor Ash.
Yeah, it's a welcome document, but like anything else, we need to set ourselves targets as well. And what concerns me is that in 12 months' time, we can be coming back round the table and talking about what we're going to do next time round. And I think whether we're in opposition or we're in power, we need to have figures we can look at to measure ourselves on. So what we need is a real starting point to say this is where we're at now, and in 12 months' time, this is our goal, what we'd like to see. And Councillor Hulk is quite right, 10 years in power, and we haven't done a lot, but the government has reduced our money over 10 years as well. So again, we're doing very well to say we've had 10 years reduction, but we're still fighting and we are making improvements. But I would like to see a figure that when we come around the council chamber, we don't just bat each other about saying what you're doing, what haven't you done. We can actually give clear figures to say that's where we started from, that's where we've moved to. And yes, we would have liked to have gone further, but we can definitely see improvements. Now, whether that means we don't set as many targets and we do less better, that's something maybe that we should look at and say, what if we can't measure some things, as we've said, they're difficult to measure, what can we measure that we can all agree on and use that then, which will be the benchmarking. So we can clearly see that we can say we are moving forward. And I liked our successes because there's nothing better than being able to say, that's what we said we were going to do. And you know what? We've actually done it against all the opposition that we face. So if that's possible, I think that would be worthwhile.
Councillor Pounds?
Yes, we are moving forward and we have made a lot of progress over the last 10 years. And I would just like to point out to the member opposite that we are a small district council and we have had to battle against years and years of austerity, which was first started by the coalition government of which his party was part to.
Thank you, Councillor Pounds. Councillor Payne?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to agree with Councillor Ashton, which we both found quite surprising, but I completely agree with your point that I think, yeah, the aims, the objectives are all very laudable, but it is that kind of ability to track, isn't it, that becomes more challenging when it's looking at the more social measures. So as an example, just looking at some of the case study approaches, so from page, so in Appendix E, there's points there such as a new community facility in East Barnwell, a public library. That's brilliant. But I think the sort of next important stage now is that we've said in this report, well, we have one new community centre. Hopefully by this time next year, we'll be aiming for 2 or 3. And that's quite a small example, but just making sure that we're not here again in a year's time saying, oh, we've got a new community centre and we're coming back round again. So it's that kind of ability to make numerate, I suppose, and make this more quantitative, just that we're moving forward, I think. So I completely agree with Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. I don't know whether Officer Kidston would like to respond.
Yes, I'm happy to respond. Thank you, Chair. I think the question around targets in relation to the community wealth building strategy is an entirely reasonable one. I've tried to provide, I suppose, some baseline figures in section 3 of the report entitled The Need for Change, so highlighting the current position in relation to a range of metrics around poverty and inequality. And as I said, in Appendix B, we have some high-level outcomes that we would look to measure, and we can certainly look at setting some reasonable kind of targets around those. I would say that the the high-level outcomes in Appendix B very much are things that would require changes at a whole system level, both locally and probably nationally as well. So the reason we have included a series of intermediate outcomes at Appendix A is that those are some of the things that we think will be really tangible measures of some of the areas of work and activities that we're planning to do. So yeah, certainly we can look at what are reasonable kind of targets for the measures that we've set out in the strategy.
Are there any further questions or statements? No? Okay, well, in that case, I'd like us to go to the vote. Could those in favour please raise your hand?
It's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And does the Executive for Community Wealth Building and Community Safety approve the recommendation?
Thank you. First and foremost, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for supporting this new strategy. As has been said, I think this is a really important piece of work for us to move on our anti-poverty work, but also look at how we can build community wealth across all of the work that we do as a council, whether that's within our procurement, which you might not necessarily think as anti-poverty work, or within the planning system. These are areas that we can have direct influence in, and it's really important for us to be taking this approach across all those areas and not just within kind of the distinctive community work that we're doing. So I'm really pleased to see that, and I'm really interested to hear people's thoughts. I'm excited to see the work that will continue now that this is in place about embedding these approaches and measuring them. I'd also just like to say that I find it slightly frustrating that Cambridge always talks about being the most unequal city in the country, which is obviously true, but that's based on one metric of wage inequality, and that's generally because we have a lot of high earners in Cambridge and a lot of not very high earners in Cambridge. And I think that it actually hides some of the richness of the city as well in other areas. And I think that's why it's important to look at these other ways of measuring community wealth and community well-being. I mean, something that we have been talking about recently is that Cambridge is one of the most happy cities to live in. And we've been talking about the way that we have lots of people who can access community centres and things like this and public art. All of this should be seen as community wealth building, and I'm really excited to be able to kind of crack open some of these ideas of how Cambridge is unequal and try and really dig into that and work in that in a really exciting way. So thank you everyone, and first and foremost thank you to the officers as well who've put a lot of work into this, into the community organisations who've been involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilderdale. And so now we'll move on to agenda item number 11, and that's on the Section 106 funding round. And the presenting officer is, again, Officer Alistair Wilson. Please, could you introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In the interest of variety this evening, I'd like to delegate this to my colleague, John Richards, who, with the Urban Growth Manager, has led on developing this report.
Yes. Can I invite you to speak, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, everybody. So the purpose of this item is to ensure that the Council continues to be able to make effective and timely use of Section 106 contributions secured through development. It's one of the series of items coming before this committee, further to the item on community and sports facilities at the January meeting, the item this evening on public art, and a further item on play and public realm contributions, which is expected over the summer period. So as members I'm sure are very aware, funding is running down across all Section 106 contribution types. And there are a number of areas, particularly where the Council is needing to make contributions and spend commitments within a very, very tight time frame now, because the funding that's available is only available for a very short period further. So the report makes a number of recommendations and takes stock both of what's been delivered And you will see in Appendix A that a dozen or so schemes have been outlined there that have been completed in recent years since we last came before the committee with an update on Section 106 informal open space spend. It also takes stock of what's changed since we last reported to you, as outlined in paragraph 3.5 of the report. And there are two schemes there particularly, one at Sheep's Green, where some funding has needed to be reallocated because the original project that was proposed there hasn't been able to move forward, and the reasons for that are outlined in the report. And a second scheme at Jesus Green Ditch, where due to various environmental difficulties that were encountered once we started on that scheme, we've needed to rescope it. And so we are proposing to reallocate some of the originally allocated funds to that project back into the Section 106 pot for reallocation to other projects. And we will now be taking forward a smaller project, which we do believe is viable on Jesus Green. The report also takes stock of remaining funds available still to commit across particularly informal open space. And Appendix B of the report and paragraph 3.2, sorry, I beg your pardon, Chair, paragraph 3.10 provides information on informal open space funds available across a number of different types, area, and availability timeline. And you'll see from the report that there is around £150,000 of generic informal open space contributions still available to allocate, and some £395,000 worth of specific contributions, which are largely agreed through the planning process. So we as a city council, and particularly our members, have less opportunity to direct where that funding is allocated towards projects directly through committees. And the report further makes a number of recommendations for new Section 106 informal open space allocations, which are set out in Section 4 of the report. And you'll see that we are recommending an allocation of £60,000 towards mature tree planting across the city to try and enhance the diversity of tree species across the city, and also the resilience that they have to both the impacts of climate change and also disease and pests. Also in Five Trees open space that lies within Chesterton, East Chesterton, we are proposing there to invest £10,000 of iOS Section 106 funding on an enhancement there to the very poor standard path through the open space, which is increasingly well used as a route not just to access the open space, but as a through route between Fen Road and the Cam Causeway area of Chesterton. We're proposing £11,500 initially towards a project at Romsey Rec, and that is primarily generic funding, but there is the potential for a top up to that, a further top up to that of specific funding if once we get into the project development of that project, we find it necessary, subject to the approval of the Executive Council, of course, this evening. There is a proposal for St Albans Recreation Ground, which lies adjacent to the New Meadows Community Centre, where we have already agreed to invest some environmental improvement programme funding. And I'll go on to how we propose to backfill some of the funds that we were going to use from EIP from that programme with Section 106 funds to enable EIP funding to be better used on further projects. But for St Albans Rec, we propose a specific £5,000 top up, if you like, to the environmental improvement and some of the Section 106 funding that we propose to backfill. And then perhaps I should have taken these in the other order, Chair, so apologies for that, but I've gone with the order that's on the paper. And then around just over £47,000 worth of investment in environmental improvement projects that have either already been delivered through a previous round of EIP in 2022-23, or have recently been agreed in the 2023-24 round, which was approved by the record of decision taken by the Executive Councillor for Streets and Open Spaces earlier this year. So by effectively substituting the environmental improvement programme funding across the several projects there, several both area and strategic allocation projects, we can not only make very, very timely and effective use of the Section 106 funding that is coming towards the end of its timeline in order for us to be able to use it, but also effectively free up environmental improvement programme funding that can then potentially be put back into the budget for EIP to potentially consider a further round of projects in the future. Chair, I must draw the committee's attention to an unfortunate error in Appendix C, footnote 22, in relation to the recommendations for St Albans Rec, where we propose that of the £10,000 environmental improvement programme funding already allocated, we substitute £6,800 worth of that with Section 106 funding, leaving some £3,200 of funding that will still be provided by the environmental improvement programme rather than further Section 106 funding. So just a minor error there, Chair, that I would draw your attention to. We do mean EIP funding there to support the 106 allocation. And the final recommendation, Chair, is around what we consider to be a necessary change in the management processes for Section 106 allocations. And this is across a number of contribution types. It was considered, I think, by the committee in January, particularly around the community and sports proposals, whereby informal open spaces funds in this particular case, approaching their time limit, might be able to be reallocated to other projects to ensure effective and timely use of that funding before it might need to be returned to developers if not utilised, and that is set out in Section 5 of the report, Chair. So, Chair, at that point, I would commend, well, both Tim and myself would commend the report and the recommendations to the committee, and we'd both be very happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Okay, I now open it to the floor to debate or to ask any questions. You make any statements for anybody? Yes, Councillor Hawke and then Councillor Powell.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for the improvements at Trumpington Recreation Ground. They've gone down really well with local residents. And I noticed in Section 3.11a...
Sorry, Councillor Hawke, could you speak closer to the microphone?
Okay, sure. Does that mean you didn't hear anything I said earlier? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the improvements to Trumpington Recreation Ground, which are well appreciated by at least most of the residents around there. But I also noticed in Section 3.11a that there seems to be money left for Trumpington, if I understood correctly. So I was just wondering what's the process of allocating that money and how can we help? Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Pounds?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to say how very much I welcome all these initiatives and how much they are going to be appreciated and are being appreciated by the residents. And you've actually hit on some really, really fine examples of where you can, on these small projects, make a big impact on residents. So, for example, in Romsey, we know that it's very much in need of renovating, but it's a very much valued green space by residents. Romsey is an area of very little green, lots of Victorian houses with no front gardens and flats, and it's a very, very well used rec. It's the route for the children to go to school and come back, and they often stay and play and chat, so it will be really, really appreciated. I was also asked actually to express the thanks of Councillor Bird, because the area in East Chesterton that's going to be renovated, the Five Trees open space and the path, she had a personal experience of a very unpleasant incident because her electric wheelchair got stuck in the mud. She had to actually call out for help to get moved, And it just highlights the fact that a decent path through there will make it accessible to everybody. So thank you very much for these.
Thank you, Councillor Pounds. And Councillor Glasberg.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the report, and thanks also to Councillor Carling for what you said about the need to ensure that communities are involved and engaged in the process of deciding these grants. I mean, I'd like to say that, for example, I think that the Environmental Improvement Programme, the way that that has been managed so far has been very open and transparent. Residents have been able to put in bids for things that they're then able to look at online, comment on, vote on. And I think that's really appreciated, although it is, of course, as always, disappointing if people spend time making their bids and they don't get them. But at least I think the process is transparent. Whereas I feel that the grants, the sports and community 106 funding, for example, is not so transparent. And it would be good to see that process made clearer. I mean, I think what Councillor Payne said about needing the engagement of, for example, residents' associations and friends groups, as well as councillors, is really important, because sometimes a bid that you might be, a group might be making a bid, for example, in a public space that does actually impact other users of that space. And I think it's really important that we get all views on it. And then the second point I'd like to make is you mentioned about not having so much say in 106 funding that goes through planning committee. And I just wonder if you could say a bit about that, because I think it would be quite important to have, for example, projects put forward that could be funded by particular developments, rather than, it seems to me that sometimes, well, I'll give you an example, that the King's development, for example, on Barton Road, which is a large number of postgraduates, the 106 funding that was allocated was for £7,000 for play equipment for Lammasland, which has not yet been spent actually, but didn't really seem appropriate. And I just think there's other things. I think that the community could also have some input into those grants, even though obviously it has to be tied back to the particular development, and there are constraints on that. And then the final point I'd like to make is about capacity, because there's a lot of projects here going on, and I think this is a huge amount of work for officers to cover. And I think it sometimes is leading to delays in projects getting implemented, which I think must be quite stressful for officers and is a bit frustrating for residents and also for councillors, because we keep getting people saying, this was agreed last year, when is it going to happen? Okay, so those 3 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glasberg. Could I invite Officer Richards to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Certainly. Thank you. Yes. Councillor Hawke's question relating to the funding that's the generic funding that's available for Trumpington, the £42,000. That, as I understand it, is money that's available for play areas. So we do say in the report that we will be bringing a further item around Section 106 play area funding, likely to the next committee meeting in June. And the next item that you will be considering tonight will be around the play spaces investment strategy that the council has, and a new tool that we've acquired to help inform how funding that we have in the future might be invested and targeted into those areas that are most beneficial to Cambridge overall. And I think that leads me quite nicely into Councillor Glasberg's question just around the involvement that we have with planning. And obviously as a service we do have a huge amount of involvement with planning in terms of providing professional advice on the securing of funds. And we do use the strategy documents and policies that we develop, and also the tools, and you will hear in the next item about the new play investment strategy investment tool. we will be using tools like that we are able to acquire to ensure that we can effectively identify those areas that are most in need, such that when developments do come forward, we're on a much stronger footing in being able to say through the planning process that we need to secure contributions and incomes for a particular area because we've been able to identify a specific need for it. So I think we are definitely moving in the right direction there. In terms of capacity, I very much share those concerns. I think what we're dealing with at the moment very much is still a legacy of a lot of agreements that were signed up during the sort of the building boom, particularly around the sort of the fringe areas of Cambridge, around sort of the mid 2010s, if you like, 2014, 15, 16, that typically would have had a 10-year lifeline timeline allocation on them. And so those are now coming up for using, and obviously a number of the contributions that we've secured, as you see in the appendix A, we have been able to use a lot of that funding and deliver a lot of projects, but we do need to, or have had to program the capacity that we've had around very much the expiry dates of the time limited contributions to make sure that we are using those in the best interests of the council and our residents, to ensure that we can make the most effective and timely use of those contributions while they're available. Yes, certainly the concern, I think, is shared across a number of the different contribution types with Section 106. But as I say, one of the points I wanted to make in the paper is that Section 106 is winding down. It really is running down now. There were changes to the way councils can secure contributions towards this type of improvement work in around about 2015. So we are coming towards the end now of those contributions that have been secured over the last 10 years or so. So there is a gradual ramping down of funding, and it's increasingly important that we are looking very, very carefully at how we can achieve the best value of money for that investment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Officer. Are there any further questions or statements anybody would like to make? Yeah.
Chair, if I can just add a number of comments following on from what John Richards has said. In terms of the approach to this Section 106 funding round for informal open spaces and the one in June relating to play areas, at the October 2021 meeting of this committee, it was agreed that given that the generic Section 106 funding has run down so much, that the focus would be, rather than having a public grants, a public proposals round, which would be maybe difficult to manage public expectations because there is the funding is unevenly spread and only available in some pockets of the city. It was agreed that there would be a more focused approach, and that is why, without a public round itself, but that is why we are highlighting in the report both for play area, the play provision proposals, that we will be getting alongside those members that where there is funding available to seek their views prior to the next committee. And we're also linking in to the to make use of those projects which have had EIP approval, Environmental Improvement Programme funding approval in the past, where it's possible where those projects would be eligible for Section 106 funding, both to make use of them, to make good use of the EIP funds, and that also helps with the capacity issue, because if some of those projects are already being taken forward and some of them have already been completed, that will help us in that way. In terms of the point about the specific contributions and the way that projects are identified for those, I'm just trying to rack my brains, in 2016, the council agreed an interim approach to identifying projects for specific funds, given that those now have to be agreed up front at planning committee, leaving very little time for those projects to be identified. The council has produced at that time target lists of which, for particular parts of the city, which possible projects might be put forward as a starting point for negotiations of specific contributions. Those are mentioned in the overview document that is on the council's website, which I referred all members to yesterday. John Richards is right that the opportunity of the outdoor play investment strategy gives us an opportunity to review which play areas we could be identifying funding for in future through new major developments. So, thank you.
Thank you, Officer Weatherfield. And now I'd like to go to the vote. Could those in favour of the recommendations please raise your hand?
Unanimous of those who can vote, Chair.
Thank you. Does the Executive Councillor for Open Spaces and City Services approve the recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. So thanks first of all to Tim and the team for all the work done on this. We're investing in some really great projects here, which I know local councillors and residents are really passionate about. We all know how often residents talk to us about having additional trees across the city, which this funding is going to help with. And there's lots in here as well being used to improve accessibility for our spaces, like the 5 Trees path improvement, which, as Councillor Pounds said earlier, Councillor Bird got stuck on recently. So it's really great that we've been able to take very quick action to deal with that. So yes, I'm happy to accept the recommendations and look forward to seeing the progress on the projects.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And now we will move on to agenda item number 12, which is on outdoor play spaces and the investment strategy. I know there's a video that we'll be looking to show, a 2-minute video.
Chair, I think we'll probably introduce the report first, if that's okay, and then we'll go to that.
Yeah, that's fine. Could the officer please present the item?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce the outdoor play spaces investment strategy this evening. At the heart of this strategy lies the business intelligence platform, which we're going to see in a moment, which is designed to empower the council to make real-time data, make decisions with real-time data. With its capabilities, we can swiftly respond to evolving needs and changes within the play portfolio, ensuring our decisions are both informed and efficient. To construct this strategy, we have updated our audit of our outdoor play provision. This assessment evaluated the current qualities, the quantity and accessibility of our play spaces and aligned them to the anticipated population growths in the city. The findings of this assessment have led to the development of a tiered system, serving to identify areas of deficiency in terms of play provision. By addressing these deficiencies, we can create a more equitable and accessible play environment for all members of the community. The proposed strategic approach heralds a shift in how we manage the future of our outdoor play services. By leveraging the power of the data from the platform, we can navigate some of the complexities around and it may be more adept in paving the way to creating more inclusive play, particularly for new generations and new communities. I'm actually supported tonight by my colleague Anthony French, who has got a short video or a demo to show us of the tool. We've also got an example of a public-facing report that we're going to make available on the website. If Anthony's available just to show us through.
Yeah, please could you show the video?
Yeah, hello. Just share for you. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the front of the dashboard. This is where the whole interface happens. This is where all the data is stored, and this is where we can manipulate everything on the system. Just to take you through a very brief overview of the dashboard as you see it tonight. Starting in the top left-hand corner, we have 103 parks in the city of Cambridge, serving a population of just under 146,000 people. Of that 146,000 people, there are 31,000 under 19s, i.e. sort of users of play, and that represents 21% of the city population. The boxes below that show the population per park, in essence, if you divided the 103 parks into equal use, and that's 1,414 people, with 303 per park of an under 19 age. Just looking at the box here next to the data, the tiers that Alistair has just referred to. The tiers, just to give you a broad overview, Tier 1 is a multi-site hub with significant play provision within it, and it is in a heavy populated area. Tier 2 would be multi-site locations linked to other sports and leisure provision, and it would contain ancillary facilities such as a cafe or toilets. Tier 3 would be a single or dual facility with some ancillary facilities, but probably not contain any or limited sporting facilities. And Tier 4 is just a single site with a play park only, serving a very local community. We also, just at the bottom of the dashboard there, have the age group population per park. A standout there would be Market and Newnham, who have 16 to 19-year-olds in significant numbers. The map on the right-hand side sort of equate to the tiers that we've just explained to you. These are all dotted throughout the Cambridge, and you can see there how the distribution is between tiers 1 to 4. Just move on a bit. We can then start to drill down into the detail using the dashboard, and we can start to look and manipulate the data, and beginning with wards. So, for example, we've stopped the screen again here on Abbey. So you see the data is now changed in the top left corner, where we had the overall data for Cambridge. We now have the Abbey data with a population of 10,768, and within Abbey there's 10 parks, and it just shows how many tiered in number there are there. So on the map on the right hand side, you'll see the distribution of the tiers and the colour coding according to the tiers, and the data below obviously is changed with the ages. The system then allows you to select multiple wards at any one time. So that there has just stopped again, and that has now selected 4 wards, and as you can see, the numbers have changed according to that change that we've just made. Just one final stop on the wards, because we've got Queen Edith open here now, and again, as with Abbey at the first, this is a single ward. We're just showing you here 4 parks in the Queen Edith ward with a population of 12,000, and the data is obviously reflected differently with the age groups. We can then further drill down. We've been to the wards now, and now we can go into individual sites. So we can, the capability of the dashboard and the system allows you to actually look at each of the 103 play parks, either singularly or in multiple, within wards, or whichever you wish to. Really, it's quite flexible. So just run through some of the situations there, as with the previous, putting together. And this is the tiers. It's very similar principle to the wards and the sites. So you can split the wards down, and you can have the different tiers within the wards. And this shows you, this is selected all the 3 tiers, the first 3 tiers of play, and shows you the distribution across the city. So there's 39 parks with tiers 1, 2 and 3. This is quite an interesting piece of data because this actually highlights singularly the Tier 4 parks in the city. As I said at the start, we have 103 parks, and we have 64 very local community-based parks with just pieces of equipment in that are key to those that live in the local areas. We can see highlighted here how Trumpington is particularly high. This would obviously lend itself towards the recent development we've had across that area in the last few years. And finally, we just take one little quick look at the filtering of age groups within the city. Again, the same principles apply. You can select categories, just one category of under fours. This shows the split across the city for that age group. This is the 16s to 19s within Cambridge. And as you can see, as we saw in the first sort of dashboard itself, the Newnham and Market wards are particularly high in that age group. Finally, just stopping on an example there within Trumpington, which shows again the distribution of 0 to 4-year-olds in that ward. So that is a very quick overview. Again, stopping at the last section here, just Castle again, just an example of a ward in the north of the city, which has quite a high population of under fours. So that's a very, very brief overview of the dashboard. When I was just before or during when I was presenting, I mentioned that you can actually have each
Officer French, are you still there? Are you still with us? Okay.
I just come in here. What we had to show, which we can, if we can get live at some point during the questions, we can put it up on the screen. But we have actually got a public-facing report that shows the play equipment. It shows the assessment of the play equipment's location. It's got photographs, the whole range of a resource that. Yeah, here's an example here of it for each one. So, Chair, that concludes our introduction. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll open the floor to the debate now. Has anybody got any questions or any statements they'd like to make on this one? Yep, Councillor Ash.
The dashboard doesn't show the numbers using the park, though. It just classifies our park, but not how many users. Is that correct?
Councillor Payne?
Thank you, Chair. I had two questions. Thank you for the demonstration. It looks, really interesting, a great way to see more about different practice in your ward as well. I just wanted to ask about, in terms of plans going forward, now we're able to much more effectively monitor the spaces that we have. Is there further plans further down the line for how this will contribute to budgetary factors in future? Is obviously to make any changes to those requires money behind it. So will this then lead to a future budget item to plug some of those gaps or adapt different elements of them? And secondly, I think we all supported Councillor Flaubert's motion a few months ago around inclusive play. Could I ask for a bit more of an overview around how inclusive play will be included in the mapping and subsequent work from there? Thank you.
That's great. Has anybody got anything they'd like to? No? Officer, would you like to?
Yeah. I unfortunately didn't hear quite all of Councillor Payne's questions, but I think I got some of it. To go to Councillor Ashton, in terms of the numbers that could potentially use it, the assessment is using ward profile data. With that, you can accurately calculate the catchment area of an open space by distance, and Play England have given us some measures to help with that. So tier 1, you would expect people to come about 1.2 kilometres. A tier 3 around about is local play provision, so you're looking at about 600. So you can start to calculate estimated numbers of people that would potentially use that play area. I think to answer the question in full would be, it will also depend on the quality of the play offer that's there, and also things like the accessibility. So it's very often, one of the weaknesses of the mapping software is you can't take into account things like main artery roads, the river. So your catchment area will be segmented by the fact you've got the river running across one of its boundaries, or you've got a main road. So, to answer the question, it's all about potential use. I think the question was around changes. We will be updating this every time we visit. We'll be reassessing the data, updating the data, so it will always be kept live. The benefit of doing that, it stops the requirement for us to have to come back every 5 years with a different report. We've got it at a time motion. In respect to play, inclusive play, we are in the public-facing, there will be a public-facing tool so people can use it. So you can be on an online resource, people can go and find play equipment. We will be listing where we have included inclusive play in the offer. When we do design play, it will always include that element of inclusivity and disability. And I think we cover those in some of the EQI assessments for this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Wilson. Could Councillor Carling?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to add very slightly to that bit about inclusive play, because obviously it's a really important part that we're all really keen on making sure we get it right. So you can see, I think, or you could see on the screen just now, there were photos of the equipment at the particular site. I think that was, which one was it? It was Trumpington, I think, Trumpington Rec. Yeah, so you can see some of the equipment on there. Obviously, those photos don't have every single piece of equipment, but we can rectify that, because the great thing about this tool is it's very dynamic. So all that has to happen is an officer can go to that site, they basically open an app, take some extra photos, make any updates needed, and then it all goes live on the website automatically. So, and what we will have in the public-facing version, when we get that online in a couple of weeks, actually, it won't take long, is the map functionality, essentially. So residents can look at the map, look at the different areas, select them, and basically print off these reports live from the most recent update from an officer. So they can access live information about what's at each play area and sort of make those decisions based on their child's individual needs. Because, of course, it's very important that they're able to do that, because it's very hard to define inclusivity, and that we can make sure that we have a good provision across the city for different types of need. And then it's important, as well as having that overall classification, that parents and families can look specifically at play equipment, knowing full well what their children will find most useful. So it's really good work being done here about making sure it's completely accessible and transparent about what we've got available. And the map functionality, which I know we had a bit of a bust-up about at the full council meeting, and I said we'll include it. We've included it.
Councillor Glasberg?
Thank you, yes. Yeah, this is obviously a great tool for being able to assess play space provision and to try to make sure that it's distributed equitably across communities. I mean, I think the Play England strategy that you've got on page 342 is a great model, but obviously we're a very long way from this in the UK. I mean, the question that was asked earlier at this meeting mentioned childhood obesity and mental health issues. And a recent report has shown that children in the UK have less outdoor exercise than a criminal in jail. And I think probably Cambridge is no exception to that. So, yeah, what I'm a bit concerned about, there's just a couple of aspects of this strategy that I'm a bit concerned about then. So in the light of the need for good quality play provision for children, I'm rather concerned that an objective of this strategy is stated to investigate ways to reduce operational costs. And, you know, I mean, obviously I know that we're in a crisis, but I don't think that cutting back on children's play provision is something that we should be doing, because I think it should be a priority for us. I also feel very concerned about this division into tiers Because while it makes sense in many ways to do that, and I can understand why, to classify tier 4, which are these very small local spaces, as being the ones that could be expendable and that are proposed that maybe could be closed, I think, again, is not taken into account the impact that this might have on people in those communities, because, again, especially for people with young children, you want to have things that are very nearby. You don't want to go somewhere for a long time. People with buggies and children that need feeding need somewhere that's nearby. And also for slightly older children, they want to go somewhere that's very nearby, where they can meet up with their friends and play independently. So I'm rather concerned about that issue. And I think that, the other issue about safety at these areas, again, that was mentioned in the question earlier about some of these, especially the smaller play areas, being the surfacing made into hard surfacing. Now, you answered, Councillor Carling, you did say that you wouldn't be using rubber crumb. But, I mean, I know that recycled tyres are used in several playgrounds in Cambridge. I mean, Lammasland at Newnham has got recycled tyres, and I've had complaints from parents on hot days that there are significant fumes from them. And I think this is really quite worrying. This is something that I think we should be looking at. And then, I mean, obviously, on page 329 of the report, you do say that no consultation has taken place yet in the report. And it's not specified in the report which play areas are actually going to be closed. So I think it would be quite good to know that. Yeah, you think they are? Okay. Well, I mean, you have said that you're going to engage with stakeholders, including children, in the future. And I just hope that would happen soon, because I do think that we shouldn't be regarding play areas that are smaller as less important. I think they're very important for those communities often. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glasgow. Councillor Carling.
Thank you, Chair. Do you mind if I just respond to some of those points, if that's okay? So I think, Councillor Glasberg, in my response to the public question earlier, one of the points I really stressed was what we'll need is a diversity of different types of play provision around the city. You know, no one has suggested that smaller sites should be closed. There was a mention in the report about we need to look at what's best in terms of there may be some that are really not very well used, in which case we can talk to the local ward councillors and we can get their view as to, well, actually, is it better that rather than maintaining this, we spend our money elsewhere in the ward? But nobody is proposing that we cut back sort of vast swathes of play areas across Cambridge, essentially. And I just want to make that crystal clear. This is about the odd occasion when we may find a play area and go, actually, this is really underutilised and we could be using this equipment or this money elsewhere much better, and enabling us to do that in full consultation with the ward councillors and anyone that would ever be affected by such a change, okay? Anything else I need to just clarify? And, well, the other thing to say is that this is about local investment, local intelligence as well. So as I think Anthony outlined earlier, Tier 4 sites have been classified that way because of sort of objective characteristics about their size and the provision there. We're not calling them unimportant. Some of them, I think the report may call strategically not important, and what it means by that is it's not sort of, they don't have major implications for the whole city on large areas. It's mainly about their impact on local communities. And that is still important. As I said earlier, it's about having a diverse mix of provision so that people can use what is most appropriate for them. Which, of course, ties into the inclusivity points, right? Because you may have certain children with disabilities that mean they'd rather be in a smaller environment with less people around, and absolutely the smaller areas are much, much better for that. So just to be crystal clear, there is no suggestion in here of closing vast swathes of play areas across the city. This is a tool to help us in making decisions about investment, which will be supplemented by local intelligence, you know, knowing how well certain areas are used, who's using them, and factoring that into all our decisions. It's not purely this doesn't prescribe what we do, it's a tool to help us.
Thank you, Councillor Carling. I don't know if Officer Wilson wants to respond as well.
I think just for completeness, just to get some assurances to some of the wording that's in the report, But the tool is about targeting the available investment with the greatest impact. It's about finding those sites that are going to benefit most from that spend. Just to touch on the operational costs, that's around routing. That's about the inspections and the efficiencies we can get from routing the inspections, because now they're mapped, we can then work to those. There's also operational costs in terms of identifying repairs quicker. There's also the operational costs can be reduced in terms of finding items we have to frequently repair and items that are always of low quality by replacing those rather than the whole play area costs. And we can also catalogue items and keep repairs, keep spares and repairs. One of the issues is we've got such a diverse range of products on our play areas, getting spares for repairs is quite difficult. And I would also just add that the data itself actually does demonstrate tier 4 value in terms of the, going back to Councillor Ashton's point, in terms of the numbers of potential users it serves. So tier 4 may be a low order, but it may have a high population of under 5s, for instance, in a local area. So it has its merit to be retained on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer. So now I'd like to go to the vote, to the substantive vote. Those in favour of the recommendations, please raise your hand.
Unanimous of those who can vote.
Thank you. And does the Executive Council for Open Spaces and City Services approve the recommendation?
Thank you very much, Chair. I do indeed. Again, I just saw Councillor Glassberg hesitating slightly there before you voted in favour. Look, I've given you all the reassurances I can, okay? No one is proposing to close vast swathes of play areas. This is about making sure that we are able to invest in our communities and improve our provision. And if you've got remaining concerns, please come and talk to me. I will happily put them to bed. Especially given, as I said before, I think in my response to the public question, what this is showing is Newnham is one of the areas that needs a bit more investment. So you will benefit from this, Councillor Glassberg. This will be good for your ward. But anyway, just to say what I was going to say, this work meets what we committed to in our full council motion in October. So we've moved very fast. And I'd like to really pay a tribute to Alistair, Anthony, John, and the wider team for their work on this. Because this system is so dynamic, we can add new functionalities as and when they are needed. So if there's anything anyone would particularly like to be added, particularly to the public-facing version, once we get that online within the next few weeks, let me know.
Thank you, Councillor Carling. Just before we move on to the last agenda item, I just want to remind members that we might have connectivity issues at 10, but we are moving in good speed, so this might not be a problem. Regardless, the rest will be uploaded anyway. So now we'll move on to agenda item 13, which is the herbicide reduction plan, and the presenting officer again is Alistair Wilson. Could you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. We heard this evening a public question from Pesticide Free Cambridge, and I'd like to start off tonight by thanking both Pesticide Free Cambridge and On the Verge for their collaboration and their continued support with this item. Thank you for the opportunity to present on a summary of the report detailing the progress and the outcomes of the herbicide reduction plan. Since its inception, the herbicide reduction plan has been the cornerstone of our commitment to reducing the reliance on herbicides in managing unwanted vegetation in the city. Today, we are proud to share with you the results of our efforts, including the evaluation of the 4 herbicide-free trial wards and the herbicide-free tree scheme. The trial areas initially implemented in Newnham and Arby were extended to Westchester and Trumping, allowing us to explore and assess a range of alternatives. Notably, our evaluation has highlighted the effectiveness and sustainability of specialist street cleaning mechanical equipment as the most viable alternative to herbicides. This method not only eliminates the need for herbicides on highway verges, roads, pavements, but it also aligns to our commitment to the environmental stewardship and protecting and enhancing biodiversity. As we move forward, we recommend the closure of the herbicide reduction plan and the approval of the new methodology that significantly reduces herbicide use, reserving its application only where there's no viable alternatives available. I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you. I'll now open it to the floor to debate this item. Has anybody got any questions or anything they'd like to say? Yes, Councillor Swift?
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to talk about the build-up of leaf mould and plants growing in streets. For example, in Westchester, my ward, in Hale Street, there's Victorian terraced houses and pavements and huge plants growing in the gap between the two. They're so big that they're almost undermining the foundations of the houses in a minor way. In another street, Primrose Street in my ward, there was a build-up of many years of leaf mould, or whatever it's called, and that was had a deep clean for the first time in many, many years. In fact, since the coronavirus, I don't think nothing had happened. I was very interested in page 366 of the pack about this new machine, a mechanical sweeper, which has a weed ripper brush that's been used in Barton Close and the Cannes Causeway. And I'd just like to ask about what would be really good. I think many councillors would really like to have deep cleaning in streets. I think our streets are in a terrible state in most wards that I cycle through. And what I'd like to ask is about the time scale that we're looking at to carry out an initial deep clean of most streets. And the other question is, are there any issues envisaged in relation to asking residents to move cars out of the way, which is a major problem with deep clean strategies? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swift. Are there any further questions? Yes, Councillor Hawke?
Thank you. Yes, of course, we are very happy with how the trial is progressing, or this project is progressing. So it started with a demotion, so it must be a good idea. But I only have one question about page 360.1.7. So it says that the trial is now recommended for closure. New methodology is used. So herbicide use is significantly reduced and limited to scenarios where viable alternatives are exhausted or no other alternative is available. So do you have any idea how often herbicides are then going to use in these scenarios and where? Why?
Thank you, Councillor Hawke. Alistair, would you like to respond now, or do you want me to ask? Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, certainly. Picking up the points in terms of just to general detritus and leaf mould, they do create a perfect environment for feed source and seeds to grow and weeds to grow from. And by removing that seed, that source, that medium for them to grow in, it does then reduce the number of instances where we get weed growth on the open channels and the carriageway. Where there is a weakness with this approach, I would admit, is around where the carriageway is in poor condition. So if the carriageway is breaking up as a consequence of that leaf mould or water ingress, we will have to have the discussions with the County Council in terms of our approach to that. We find where that is presented, we have got alternative, which is the hot foam product, which will be allowed, which we potentially could use, but that is very inefficient in terms of time because it's reliant on operatives moving around cars and various obstacles. In terms of the time scales, some of the equipment, because the budget was approved at council, we have got costs for those. We haven't placed the orders until we've had this decision this evening in terms of approving the methodology. Now we've got, if we do get that approval this evening, we can place orders for that equipment. Some of the equipment has quite an extended lead-in time. However, the more portable products, the weed rippers that we use, that you saw in the pictures, will be available with about probably an 8-week lead-in period. Where we have requests to do the deep clean, any help with the comms around moving cars would really be very helpful. We have one excellent example in Union where we've carried that out, where we got ward councillors asked for cars to be moved, and the operation was far quicker, far swifter, and really very efficient. And when we once we've been round, the intention is to go round the whole city and continue to do that on a cycle, but we will make a judgment when we turn up as to whether where's the level of weed growth acceptable or not before we make that carry out the work. We have got a methodology that's prepared. I had it added as an appendix to the report, but I just thought it was possibly too much information for later, last agenda item, so I've removed that. So if anyone would like me to share that with him, I can do that. In terms of the exemptions, in terms of where we might use herbicides, those are going to be where we have the weeds, they're usually invasive. They present a real problem in terms of things like Himalayan balsam, Japanese knotweed, some of those really quite aggressive and assertive weeds that will not respond to this methodology. So we do need to keep that in our arsenal should they arise that we need to deal with those types of weeds. We're very fortunate in Cambridge that we've got very few outbreaks of Japanese knotweed. We do get the odd giant hogweed, that tends to be on ditch lines, and Himalayan balsam is an issue, but not to the extent we need to spread it at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer. Councillor Pounds?
Yeah, can I just go back to the issue of cars? Because we, in my area, we have a particular problem because we're houses straight onto the pavement, no front garden. So using herbicide is not ideal because it's very, very close to people's front doors. We've got parked cars solidly in the streets, and a lot of them, because it's not residents parking, are people using the station, people who leave their cars for 2 weeks. So we know that when we, for example, when we have a street party, we can't, we put notices up, all sorts, to clear the street, and yet there still will be 2 or 3 cars that are just stuck there in the way that tend to get used for people's beers and things because they're stuck there because they're not local. So from that point of view, are these machines going to be able to wiggle around cars, or is there an alternative for streets like ours, which urgently do need cleaning?
So there will need to be an extensive collaboration with our county colleagues because they've got the powers to close the road and ask cars to move, so there'll be suspensions in place. What I'd like to give you just the assurance is that if the road is clear, the operation is really quite swift. So for instance, Barton Close, I think, took 45 minutes. So the actual ask of residents is possibly an hour to move your car, find somewhere else alternatively while we do the operation. If we find it may well be that some cars don't move, there's a potential for us to come back later and work around it, or we can treat it in other ways. We could possibly use the foam machine in those scenarios. But the other benefit from this is when we're clearing the highway, our county colleagues can also effect repair. So they could look at line. We can tie in with them in terms of having a lining team available, having a pothole team available. As we do the operation, they can follow in behind and do minor repairs if they're required to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer. Councillor Ashton?
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report. Everybody jumped on the herbicide-free, no more May, and what a great thing it's going to be. And what it's actually done is made a lot of areas look very untidy. That then increases fly tipping because people lose the sense of pride. It's a mess, I'll drop something down anyway. And I think this is the right step forward now. I understand people wanting to move herbicide-free, and I think we tried our best to try and say, do you know what, we'll do our best. But the reality now after the trials has been, it's not worked. The number of residents who say it's never looked as messy in certain places. I'll agree, my colleague, that residents in Cherry Hinton in certain areas have said, I've never known it look as messy as weedy. So I think the quicker we can move on to this equipment all across the city, the better it will be. But obviously it's going to take time, and I don't think we should be saying we're going to make it as clean as it was before. But yeah, it's a big step forward, and I thank you for your time and effort in looking into how we can go about improving what we've done.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Councillor Glasgow?
Yeah, can I just say, I didn't know that Cherry Hinton was one of the trial areas, but Newnham is a trial area, and it's true that some residents have had those concerns about weeds in the gutter and described it as looking like a third world area. But I have to say that most people have welcomed it, and we've had very positive feedback on it, which I guess is why the trial is being extended, the pilot is being discontinued, and we are now going to try to implement this across the city. And I welcome that. As regards the street cleaning, yes, I've worked with the team, the highways and the street cleaning team, and have sent out notices. I've just delivered them the day before, or a couple of days before, to the people in the street. They move their cars, they come in and clean the street, and it has worked really well. But I would say that I think I welcome what you said about being able to work with the county on this, because obviously we've got the city responsible for some things like cleaning the gutters, but the county responsible for other things like cleaning the drains. So you have problems that even if the leaves and debris are cleared from the gutters, there is still flooding in the street because the drains are blocked. So it would be really good to be able to coordinate on those things. And actually, if you could go even further and get them filling the potholes in the street as well, residents will be thanking us and jumping for joy. So on that note, the other thing that I think that we would be really good to do is what Pesticide Free Cambridge were asking you about, the communication strategy on this, because I think it's really, really important. Because I do think that a lot of this requires a change of thinking on people's parts, and they need to understand why we are making these changes. And otherwise, they do just see it as looking untidy. And for example, I had one resident who stopped me in the street and said, you know, look at this, you know, these weeds here. She said, I don't think this is safe for my dog. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. Would you rather that your dog was being exposed to these toxic chemicals? People haven't seen it like that, and they need to be able to understand that, I think. So, yeah, communication's key, I think. Thank you, anyway. And thanks, Alistair. I'd really like to just thank you and all your team for the work that you've done on this and for making it a success. And to the street cleaning team for coming in and acting on those things, which has addressed the concerns of residents. And it can't all be done at once, but it reassures them that there's a programme and that this is not just a case of the council trying to save money by not doing anything, basically. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glasberg. Are there any further questions? Councillor Swift.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I think I was thinking of a conversation I had with Anne Rivington, who's the sort of herbicide person one of the herbicide people in West Chesterton experiment, the Happy Bee project. And the point she made was that the messy verges, herbicide-free and Happy Bee doesn't mean that you have a sort of third world weeds growing everywhere. That's when it's not being implemented correctly. And if it's implemented correctly, you can have herbicide-free schemes that actually look neat and tidy and don't look really awful. And it's how it's implemented that's the important thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Officer, would you like to respond? Do you have anything further to add?
Just in my final summary would be, other than the recommendations of the report, I think the other important section is probably section 5, which is the communications and ongoing considerations. So it's the discussions we've got to have with the County Council in terms of the specification change, because that does potentially impact on the streetscape and how the city will look. And also, just to give some assurances that we have started a relatively strong communication strategy with Pesticide Free Cambridge and On the Verge. So the City Matters magazine has got an article this month on this topic. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So now I would like to go to the vote. Could those in favour please raise your hand?
Unanimous of those who can vote.
Thank you very much. And does the Executive Council for Open Spaces and City Services approve the recommendations?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm so pleased that we've been able to make herbicide-free operations work, and not only work, but excel. What this report outlines is a great way for us to remove herbicide use in our regular operations pretty much altogether, while improving the way we clean our streets and moving to a proactive, effective mechanism for doing so. As Councillor Swift just said, we're implementing it correctly. This was a manifesto commitment for Cambridge Labour, and so it's a particular source of pride that we've now achieved it. We will, of course, continue to engage with the County Council going forward. Their decision to restart planned spraying on county highways land is unfortunate, but we welcome the reassurances we've received about Cambridge being able to avoid that due to our clear capacity to deal with the issue ourselves with this new methodology. Councillor Houck, I wasn't going to mention this, but you've just started it by saying this originated from a Lib Dem motion. I refer you to the quotes from Liberal Democrat councillors on the County Council, arguing that the county got it wrong when they decided to abolish planned herbicide spraying, turning back on their policy and reintroducing it. So perhaps you can get your colleagues to change their minds. Though I recognise they've ensured, along with my Labour colleagues over there, that we'll be able to avoid spraying in Cambridge, as I just said, and I'm grateful for that reassurance. In the future, once we've gone through all of our own streets with the new equipment, and I stress, only once we've gone through all of our own streets, there may even be a potential here for us to offer the services to organisations like parish councils, for whom it makes more financial sense to purchase clearing services from other authorities than to do it themselves. That could provide a revenue stream once our own streets are on track. I stress, I don't want any media headlines about that. So there's a huge amount to be positive about here, and I look forward to continuing to work on improving our streets and open spaces in Cambridge for everyone, and thank everyone for their support.
Thank you, Councillor Carling. This is the last Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee for this political term. I'd just like to thank everybody for your contributions and to the council staff for all your efforts in making this committee run so effectively and so well. And we're well in time, so 9:45, everybody. Oh, Councillor Carling?
And may I thank you, Chair, for your chairing of the year.
Thank you.